Hello everyone and welcome back to Age of Nagash, which is a channel dedicated to Age of Sigmar, and in this video we're talking things all Soulblight Gravelords, so the vampire count of Age of Sigmar. And joining me in this video is the one and only Alex, who has joined me for Why Play Ironjawz and Why Play Living City. So how are you doing today, sir?
I'm good, how are you?
I am doing very well, thank you. I'm actually quite excited in this video because, unlike some of the armies I cover that I honestly don't really care about, this is an army that is very close to my heart, and it's an army that I've been wanting to do some videos on lately for sure, and I finally managed to get around to today on talking about this army. And I think it's always nice doing a topic on why play a certain army rather than like deep dives and all the tactical depth of the army, just to try and help people know if they want to do an army, especially when it's brand new. And I think we can say Soulblight Gravelords is still a shiny army. It didn't come out that long ago.
Yeah, for sure. It's the new shiny army. It's good. It's fun.
Definitely. And so Alex has got some experience with the army. He's been playing on it quite a bit on Tabletop Simulator. So I thought, as it's an army, like I said, that's been quite new. I've had some experience with this army, but not as much as Alex. So I thought, great opportunity to ask you on these little bit of advice that you learned from. You can read a book, can't you? But you don't really know until you actually start playing those games. That's how I feel, anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Once you get to a point, you can kind of read a book and see what there is, but until you actually see how it all interacts on a table and especially like against other armies, yeah, then you can really see what works and what doesn't.
Exactly. So, for anyone who is new to a why play video on this channel, essentially what we're going to do in this army is we're going to talk over many things, but we'll do a quick summary of the lore. We're then going to go into basically the strengths and weaknesses of this army, and hopefully get to the bottom to help you guys find out if this is an army that you actually want to play, or if it's an army that maybe you don't and you want to focus on something else. Alternatively, if you've got some like Legion and Nagash models knocking around that you'd be meaning to work on, and go, oh, I heard they're getting a new battle tome, I'll leave them, see what happens. Hopefully this video will give you the motivation to crack open those models and actually get painting on them so you can use them in your games of Age of Sigmar. Of course, if there's anything that you feel like we didn't cover in this video, although we will do our best, or any other questions you've got on the Soulblight Gravelords, make sure you put that in the comments down below, and I'll be happy to answer that best that I can as well, as there's so much to talk about Soulblight Gravelords that we can only put in one video. But I will be doing a long in-depth series on the Soulblight Gravelords. Even if they don't win one of my polls on YouTube, it's an army that I care a lot about, and I'm very motivated to do it. So with that, the first thing we're going to talk about is the lore for this army. So I do always like to look at these armies when I talk about them, to people who obviously are experienced in Age of Sigmar, but also people who are brand new to Warhammer in general. So Soulblight essentially means vampires. Now, in Age of Sigmar, it's not like purely for copyright purposes. There's no mention of vampires anywhere. No, they are like keyworded vampires and everything else, but Soulblight essentially means the curse of the vampires. If you look at it, if you are coming from Warhammer Fantasy, for example, they are basically the vampire count of Age of Sigmar, and it's taken us a little while to get like a vampire count faction in Age of Sigmar, so that's something I'm very happy about and do appreciate. And really, to talk about the Soulblight, so to be Soulblight, essentially it is a biological and arcane curse. And what do I mean by that? So to become Soulblight, you can basically be bitten by a vampire. There are other rituals. Some vampires take it as a very like a strong tradition to convert a mortal into a vampire, and there's lots of basically loopholes and stuff you have to jump through to get to that, to sort of achieve that rank of being a vampire. But then other vampires kind of use it as a recruiting method. So if you're for example, some vampires, if they are from a very historical and have a great house of nobility in a vampire empire, something like that, which they do exist in Age of Sigmar, they may be very selective on who they choose to become a vampire to join their vampiric court. And then you may find that there are some more feral vampires that just basically run around in the wild, very bestial, and they'll just go, well, if I'm only one vampire, I can't hope to try and take down that, enemy warband. But if I convert another human to be a vampire, we can take down the enemy warband, and then it just becomes kind of like a recruiting method with no like traditions or finery in it at all. And when I talk about it's a curse, so it's kind of a double-edged blade when I say that. So basically, the biological changes that can happen to you as being a soulblight, being a vampire, is you do have this, I want to say, uncontrollable urge to drink blood. It's something that we're very used to with vampires from, doesn't matter what fancy background it is, doesn't matter what history or mythology, vampires do like to drink blood. As far as I'm aware of, and that is very much the case in Age of Sigmar. But if they don't get enough blood, they find it hard to control their more monstrous animalistic nature, and will eventually become things like, if you're familiar with like Vargeist models, those sorts of things, where instead of having a normal four limbs, arms and fingers and hands and everything else, they all turn into like bat-shaped wings. Their jaw will become elongated with like razor sharp like teeth, so like sort of the size of kitchen knives, and everything else. Their feet will turn into more like claws. All those sorts of things, just so that their biological needs of drinking blood will conquer their I don't want to say human nature, but basically their intellect of their mind. The need for blood will conquer that, and then that's when they have things like Vargeist and everything else. But there are some dynasties, maybe a strong word for those sort of dynasties, but there are some dynasties that actually choose to become more monstrous and everything else, because they see that as their destiny to become as good as they can. And then when we go on to talk about things like the arcane side of the curse, so what does that mean? Now that means essentially when you become a vampire, sometimes it can take a little bit longer, it can take a bit quicker than others, but you become infused with Shaishian death magic, so like magic from the realm of death, And what that means is that you start to have a mastery over the dead, and that means that obviously you can resurrect things. So you may just have there's weaker levels along a line here. So there may be some vampires that are only capable of resurrecting, a handful of zombies, skeletons, but then the ones who are stronger at will and mind will be able to resurrect entire armies, and that's where we have things like named characters like Manfred von Carstein, or we have Neferata, who are obviously very prominent characters in Age of Sigmar, and have a huge mastery over the dead, and in particular the undead, of course. And really, as well as being a vampire where you gain incredible strength, you become much faster, you have superhuman reflexes, everything else, you also become a lot smarter. But that's not just because like your brain grows or anything like that. Essentially what happens is you become immortal. So that means that obviously you live for a very long time, which means you have an incredible amount of time for learning. And you'll find if you try and learn a new skill and you study a subject for 2 years, how much more in depth, in our own society, you become at learning a new skill. Imagine you're a vampire and you dedicate 200 years for martial prowess, or 200 years to learning and fine-tuning your abilities over Shaishian death magic. You're going to become so much more smarter and more intellectual in those sort of areas. And imagine if you've been around for 2,000 years, and how much time you could have dedicated to so many skills to help you in your very ambitious journey of becoming the most powerful Soulblight vampire there is. As being a Soulblight vampire isn't really because I'm going to bring you here, Alex, because some people see the Soulblight vampires as maybe not the nicest, creatures, or the good guys. I'm going to say they're the good guys. What is your sort of side of this fence?
It's all like a sliding scale when it comes to AOS, isn't it? Like, I don't think there really is any good guys. But as far as it goes within AOS, yeah, they're pretty good. They're not. They're just kind of doing their own thing, getting blood, yeah, living their best lives.
Exactly. There are worse things to bump into the woods at night. is all I'm going to say. So with the vampires and the Soulblights, it's not like when you become a vampire, you immediately become, evil, if you like. And as Alex has said, Age of Sigmar is incredibly grey in what is good, what is bad. And like I say, you don't become evil, or you don't become, an arsehole, a bastard, whatever you want to call it, like, Manfred. But you have to admit, after, let's say you've been a vampire for 100 years, let's just say, firstly, you've got superhuman natural, strength, everything else. You're going to develop like a superiority, issue over the rest of the mortal kind, because you're far more superior than they are. And also, after 100 years, unless you know anyone else is a vampire, all your loved ones, everyone else who you knew from your mortal life is probably dead. Sad times. So you've probably gone to this level where you think that you are above and beyond mortal folk. And then because of that, if you don't see mortals as being on the same level as you see them as being below you, then your compassion and care and everything else for lesser beings, lesser creatures, can heighten your superiority complex. And then that's when you can get some vampires that go, what, they just butchered an entire, I don't know, village or settlement for X reason. Do they not feel any sorrow, any shame, or anything like that? It's like they've been around for a long time. They honestly look at these humans that they've just killed as an example, or they just drank the blood, and they'll look at them and they'll just go, they're gonna die at some point anyway. It means very little. So yeah, that sort of like explains a bit about the vampires, and like I am gonna do more lore on the Soulblight Gravelords as we go forward into Age of Sigmar, but I wanted to do a bit of a summary of kind of what a vampire is, as I did do a lore video on the vampires, and I may have been the first ever person to do a lore video on the vampires, because it was about 3 years ago when the lore for a Vampire Lord was a sentence. So it has developed a little bit more since then. All I just want to say is just a couple more things just to make some interesting notes and stuff before we move on to the sort of like tactics and the strengths and weaknesses of the army, is that all vampires in Age of Sigmar are descended from 3 characters, which are going to be Neferata, so from the Soulblight Gravelords, and Manfred von Carstein, again from the Soulblight Gravelords, and Usharon, who I hope I pronounced that right, which is basically the more bestial side, and is where the Flesh Eater court, shall we say, came from. But although all these vampires are descended from those 3 characters, many of their descendants have actually created their own dynasties, and that's something that we'll mention later in this video. And then just something else I want to say as well is all these vampires are not loyal to Nagash. So Nagash has had such a tight grip on many of the factions within the Grand Alliance of Death. However, the Soulblight Gravelords, the reason why they're have had a release now, shall we say, they have always been around since the start of Age of Sigmar pretty much, but the reason why we start seeing them now is because in these Broken Realm series of books where there's been colossal battles and realm changing events, the Soulblight Gravelords have seen all these changes and devastating events as power vacuums where they've just gone in to fill the gap, and now they've seen that Nagash is losing his grip on Shyish and all the forces of death. The Soulblights are not trying to do a resurrection, but they're just trying to push their borders as much as they can. But some can be very loyal to Nagash if you do want that to be the case as well. And you may be wondering, why is Nagash in the Soulblight Gravelords book? And that is basically just because he was basically responsible for all vampires existing in the world that was. He played a big part in that. That's all I'm going to say. That could be a whole new lore video if you wanted that. And the other thing I just want to say, we've talked so much about the Soulblight and the vampires that there are actually other types of lords, and could say Gravelords in this book, and that's like Death Rattle kingdoms. That's like kingdoms that are basically entirely made out of skeletons. So things like they're led by a White King, and then they have Black Knights, Graveguard, and Skeleton Warriors essentially in their army, because they were just like a human mortal kingdom. Something bad happened and they all got resurrected, and some of them retain their memories, so they continue their kingdom empire, but just in undeath. And I think that's pretty much all I want to say for a summary. Is there anything else that you want to add to that, Alex? Or
No, I think you covered it pretty good.
fantastic. And all I'm going to say is that I'll do more lore videos and stuff for the Soulblight Gravelords going forward. But in the meantime, if you're really, really hungry for the lore, I know 2 Plus Tough has probably done, as he usually does with these releases, like a really good series of lore videos for this army. So definitely go over to like Doug's channel at 2 Plus Tough if you'd like to find out some more information on that. Okay, so now that we have done the lore for this army, let's go into the first question I'm going to ask you, Alex, which is, I know that you've been playing this army on TTS opposed to buying all the models and everything, but why did you choose this army?
Yeah, man. So like basically, I like sort of having a good working knowledge on pretty much every army in Age of Sigmar, just so I know what I'm up against normally. So whenever a new book drops, I kind of will always look into it and build some lists, see what I think is good and what's not. And in the instance of Soulblight, I was reading through it. I was like, this is really interesting. Like, there's a lot of very cool stuff that you can do here. Like, it's definitely an army you can't just push forwards and play. Like, if you just play it very simply, like you'll probably get stomped quite a lot. Like, there's a lot of sort of trickery and technical aspects to it. It's also got a lot of different play styles. So I mean, I do love the aesthetic, and although while I'm playing at TTS, it's still playing with models that are very interesting and cool to me.
I think you've got a lot of like on your hobby play at the moment. Like I reckon if you didn't have some of your armies, you'd be tempted by this one. I think.
Yeah, I've got 2K of Daughters of Cain sat in boxes staring at me right now, and
So many eyes.
I think that's me for the rest of the year. But yeah, maybe next year, depending on what else drops between now and then. Soulblight might be my 2022 army. Certainly, really enjoy playing them, and will continue to do so on TTS.
Yeah, definitely. That's cool. And it's an army that, like I said, I haven't got as much experience as you as playing this army yet. But someone who's got so much experience of playing Legions of Nagash, and I really like that army. And I played it very differently. I didn't take blocks of Grimglass Reapers or Summit Summonable just to bring back when it dies and make my opponent want to not claw their eyes out, but probably claw my eyes out of just pure annoyance. I played very much like I'm going to take 6 Morgasts, Archive Harbingers and Nagash and just have a great time. Like, how many Vampire Lords and Zombie Dragons can I fit in a Legion of Blood list? Like, I tried lots of different things out, and I enjoyed the book, but it was clear that Legion of Nagash did need an update. And for anyone, I probably should have mentioned this at the start, but I've just said it so many times now. For anyone wondering, Soulblight Gravelords is basically like the new book for Legions of Nagash. That's essentially what Legion of Nagash has evolved into. Doesn't have all the same units, but it has the majority of them. And when I was reading through the Soulblight Gravelords book and seeing all these leaked, because we had the whole battle tome was leaked on the internet practically, which was fantastic. And I was reading through it, and it just felt like there's so many different play styles, and there's just so many fun things you could do in the book. And that's really what showed to me why I'd really find this quite fun. It's for someone who has lots of the models anyway. And I like what you mentioned there, Alex, as well, how it's not just push forward and you're pretty much half the way done. What I like about this is you have to be some synergies are easier than others, but you have to be a bit clever where you find the synergies in this book to really make the most out of them. And that, for me, that's half the fun when it comes to like list building.
Yeah, for sure. Like, there's I'll talk about them more later, but Graveguard are one of the big winners in this book.
Yeah.
And like a block of 20, you can potentially get doing 120, 130 damage. From like a block of 20 or 30. Like their output is nuts. But for that, you require like 6 buffs, maybe, which is never going to happen in a game of AOS. So yeah, it's very much like deciding what buffs you want and like when and how you're going to apply them. And like that is kind of a trend throughout the book.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I think that's a great reason, to choose this army. And then the next question I'm going to ask you, Alex, is what would you say are the strengths of this army off the table? And I know, like you said, at the moment it's mainly just playing TTS, but I know what you like. You've probably looked a bit, if you were to actually do this army, how is it feasible? So what would you find how this army is like to build and paint and collect? And what I can say is I can step in on this one as well, because someone who has got a lot of these models already, I find that this army has a relatively huge model range to choose from. There's quite a few, although it's like, all undead, there's quite a few varieties and painting styles, like, Death Rattle, you've got all the skeletons, all the bone, you've got, zombies with all the flesh, and meat and everything hanging off. And these new models that they've came out for zombies are so, like, characterful as well. That's an army that you can, I would say, paint up pretty quickly, depending on what way you want to go. But it's also an army that you can paint up very slowly, because a lot of these new models have lots of detail, but it's quite cleverly gone around it because it's death. You could be, I don't want to use the word lazy, but you could be very efficient with your time and be quite quick with contrast and everything else, and go, I don't know, oh, there's the crow pecking out the eye out of one of the zombies on his head. He's got a bit of brown on it. Yeah, well, the crow's flying around in the graveyard. It's a bit dirty, so you've got the excuse of painting undead models. But if you wanted to really go into the higher end of painting styles, I imagine you could paint up a unit of Blood Knights really beautifully. Like, there's just that different level I find with this army.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I think, like, definitely, the strength of it is the new release of models. Like, especially sort of Radikar the Beast and those Blood Knights, even the new skeletons. They're just stunning. If you want to make an army pretty much wholly out of just new models and use none of the old collection, you could 100% do that, and it would be really good. As you said, equally, if you wanted to go for a horde of zombies and just slap contrast on, 120 zombies, while it might take you a day and not be the most fun thing ever, but at the end of it, you have like a fully functioning army with actually sort of not that much effort put in. So yeah, you can definitely go either way.
Yep, fantastic. And I know, like, we'll mention this later as well when we talk about the sub-allegiances for the army. So they're different, like, bloodlines, dynasty. I think they're called dynasties in this book. They all, you can see when you look at them all, it's like, oh, I want to have more of this unit in this dynasty than everything else in the book. As an example, like, they specialize on what units work best in each dynasty. But the 60 zombies, or the 120 zombies you mentioned that you just painted, you could still use in every dynasty. Like, it's not like, I'm going to have to restart the army completely again when I want to play it in a different dynasty, a different sub-allegiance. But it means that you can use your same collection, and then it gives you an excuse to buy Blood Knights or something like that. And go, actually, if I want to go for the what's it, the Castellet, I believe it's called.
With Blood Knights are battle line, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Where it's like, I've been looking for a reason to get, like, Blood Knights or something like that. Well, that's like a fantastic reason. So there's loads of ways and reasons to actually buy any unit from this army, apart from its Black Knights, and make really the most out of them. So no, that's cool. And they've got, like I said, huge model range. They're great for painting, and it's an army that you could have hordes with, or it's an army that you could have quite a elite model count, which is quite nice, rather than it just being one or the other, essentially. So with that, what would you say are the weaknesses of this army off the table, Alex? So that's mainly things like that are kind of like, is this army particularly easy at starting to collect? I think that's quite a good question.
Yeah. Firstly, like, I'd say one of the weaknesses, before going on to that, is there are still old models. Things like the Graveguard, which, as I've alluded to, are probably one of the best things in the book. They're still very old models, and while at the time they were great, now when you put them in an army next to, the new skeletons and the new Blood Knights, like, they definitely show their age. And there's not many, like, probably now about 20% of the model range is old, and the rest is new by and large. But yeah, there's still those odd pockets where you're painting very old models which don't necessarily fit with the aesthetic of the rest of the army. In terms of start collecting, they did release a new start collecting box with the Reeds of Soulblight, which was a new White King, Graveguard, and Black Knights. Graveguard are amazing. Like, it's probably worth it just for getting 20 Graveguard in the box. The White King, he's got problems. He needs an FAQ as he is. He's essentially useless other than making Graveguard battle line. And then, Black Knights, the real losers in the book, just doing nothing, which is sad. But yeah, so, like, you've got that. Like, that's definitely a way in. Things like the skeletons are actually quite a cheap way in, because you get a 20 in a box for maybe about £30. I can't remember exactly how much they are, but like pretty reasonable for like a big horde of skeletons. Also, a lot of the old start collecting boxes will still be around. So like if you want a Mortark and old skeletons, you've got the old start collecting box for that. You can always get like the Flesh Eater Court start collecting
Yep.
box if you want like Vargheists and the Zombie Dragon.
And
So
very
like
interesting looking zombies as well. You get 10
yeah,
interesting looking zombies from that box.
exactly. So like there's ways to do it. It's definitely not going to be the most expensive and difficult army to collect, but nor is it, buy four, start collecting boxes and win.
Yeah.
It's, sort of in that middle ground. But yeah, definitely not a difficult army to start collecting for sure.
Which is cool because that presents the question of like is it good for beginners, the army, which is quite nice. And I think I definitely feel like this is an army where when I looked at I think it's the video I did, like the leaked prices for this army or the new stuff that was coming out, I was looking at it and I was like, I was expecting some of these models to be more expensive than they are. So it's a bit of like a fresh air from like Lumineth Realm Lords, if I was to name one. That's can be significantly more expensive to do. Like you said, like skeletons, they're about £35 for like a box of
Yeah.
20, and I think the old skeletons they upped the price before they got rid of them for like 10 for 20. So I think
Mm.
if anything, these might be cheaper.
Yeah, exactly. I think like their skeletons are very cheap. Like for their points, they're still, it's kind of an expensive box. But the point is that there's a lot of very good and quite expensive for their points heroes in the book. So while you might spend for their points more on those skeletons, but you're getting those bodies, you're then spending less when you're buying those big heroes.
Exactly.
Whereas, yeah, something like Lumineth, where you're paying the elf tax and you're having to buy continual boxes of 10 wardens, and it's like hitting you in the wallet every time. Yeah, there's a big difference for sure.
Which is cool. And like I know like you didn't mention it, Alex, because like talking about from buying new and stuff from a shop, but I will of course say, which I know you would say as well. If you're looking for as well, you could probably buy some older Soulblight Gravelord models, like the older skeletons and stuff that you can still use, like very cheap on eBay, things like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is and you can still use those older models. I mean, I bloody hope so. If I've got like over 120 or something of those paying up, I will not be buying the new ones. Yeah, that's cool. And then now that we talked about sort of like off the table play, what would you say are the strengths of the army on the table? So this is obviously quite a big question. So I want to start off by asking you, how do they play?
So there's definitely variety. Like there's a number of different routes you can go down. No matter what you do, they're going to be a combat orientated army. They've got no ranged options. They are there. They're going to move up the field, and they're gonna beat up your opponent.
No
You've
clan.
definitely got no. You've definitely got like deep striking options, and you've got the grave sites, which are really, the way they've changed the grave sites is excellent and really good. So you have got a lot of movement shenanigans, which we'll talk about later. So they play really nicely in the movement phase. But yeah, ultimately, it's a lot of aura management. It's a lot of making sure your buffs are in the right place and putting your buffs and debuffs correctly. Things like making sure that your deathless minions, which is your 6-up feel no pain bubbles, are all correct. And then yeah, if you can kind of achieve all of that, if you can get all your buffs on the right units at the right times and pick the right times to fight, then you just absolutely blow your opponent up. And yeah, I think Soulblight going into any other combat army in the game stands toe to toe with them. Yeah, that's pretty much how they play, I'd say.
Good. That was fun.
It's also worth noting, sorry, that that's quite stark in contrast to old Legions of Nagash, which is very much stand on objectives and then reanimate and bring units back to life. There is still definitely like healing and bringing units back to life, but it's been, you could argue, nerfed. But like
I
while
think
that
that
single aspect has been nerfed, the rest of the book has been brought up.
I think I know like you briefly mentioned that point there, but I think we'll stay on this. I'm going to call it uncomfortable point for a little bit because
Yeah.
For people who are looking at doing this army, you may have joined, I don't know, there's fantastically run, Facebook groups and stuff like, I remember like, I think it's the Grand Alliance Deaf group of Facebook, which is run by a fantastic guy called Deke, who's he's been doing it for absolutely bloody ages, and the group's gone massive and stuff. But let's say you're new and you joined that, or you spoke to some local hobby guys and all that sort of thing. They're like old school Legions and Nagash players or something, and the voice on the internet, well, the loud voice on the internet was Soulblight Gravelords. What a massive nerf to like Legions and Nagash. It's the army's unplayable. Like literally, someone offered me the battle tome, and I asked them to shoot my daughter in the head with a shotgun instead, because that would be less painful than playing with this book. I think it's important to talk about all these loud voices that are on the internet. I certainly saw a lot of them, and I'm not trying to say that their opinion is invalid, because I know I'll get hate on this video for saying that, but I think that their opinion is kind of invalid, because I just feel like, as you mentioned, this book plays a different playstyle, and to be honest, like instead of just being one-dimensional in that book, like I said, in Legion of the Gash, I tried to play different sort of styles, but it just didn't really work out, because the book didn't want you to play like that. It wanted you to play blocks of big summoning units, you block of Grimghast Reapers die, you bring back another one. In this book, it's not like the play style has changed to something else. It's changed to multiple things. And I think because it's not as straightforward anymore, that's where, everyone's like this. I'm like it as well sometimes, where like openness to change isn't that great. And I think just because this book has such a different play style, it's I think maybe it shocks some people. Would you say that's like a fair enough thing to say, Alex?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, yeah, if you look at it through the lens of what you were expecting, then yeah, there's plenty of stuff where you're like, oh, this isn't great, and it's by no means a perfect book. Like this is a solidly fat middle
Yeah.
book. Like most of the time, this will be going 3-2 at a 2-day tournament in the hands of a very good player for 1. But like actually, that's probably that's where we want to see books. We don't necessarily want to be seeing the Seraphons and the Zinches of the world like all the time, because there is a lot of negative play experience attached to those books. Whereas something like this, if more books were like this, then I think the game would be in a better state.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure like you might be playing against, you might have your opponent, and your opponent might just go, oh, for God's sake, please stop turning my units into wolves and stuff. Like, that might be such, but joking aside, I completely agree with you there. I think like my views on the top armies was seems to be such a difference between them and the fat middle. Maybe if they just make all the new books like the top armies, won't be a problem. Clearly they're not doing that, so it'd be nice if...
then we get power creep, which is also a problem.
It is, but yeah, exactly. And like the point I wanted to make here is
Yeah.
to anyone new who's very new to this hobby, like if I was to go look into 40k, for example, which is something I don't know much about, and I ask guys like, well, what, like I want to do, I don't know, Space Marines, focus on like Black Templars and stuff. I could go into a store and people go, oh, you don't want to do that because that's a terrible idea because of this reason, because they used to be really good like back in 8th edition, but now they've done this in 9th, and then you're just like, I was just asking a question because I like the models. Don't be put off by the voices you hear on the internet, and I think you could say that about pretty much any subject known to humankind apart from genocide. Generally the voices about genocide is do not do it unless it's in a fantasy setting. Then kill whatever fantasy army you like in mass ethnic cleansing numbers. But yeah, I think that's really enough to say.
Yeah. I just want to add to that. I think like comparing a book against the top 3 or 4 armies is pretty disingenuous. It's just like, yes, they're the top armies. Why are we comparing them? Why don't we look at the other 25 books which we've got and actually compare it to them? And when you start looking at those 25 books with Soulblight, then you start to see the potential of the book. Like, there's every chance that if this book goes into Caradron Overlords, for example, when you get double turned by them, then you lose end of turn 2. But also, that's the case with pretty much all armies.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Exactly well said, mate. I think some people, like I'm not saying most people, but some people, if something new comes out and it's not the new broken thing, they don't want to know about it, which I don't think should be like you say, the way we look at stuff. And as I always say when I review loads of armies, most of your games probably aren't going to be at a tournament on the average for most people. Let's say you play a game every week. Let's say you're lucky enough to do that. 52 weeks in a year, you go to 2 tournaments, let's say a year. I'm not going to do the maths actually right now because that was too much for me to process. But most of your games are going to be with your buddies at your local store. It's not going to be against the top armies more than likely. So yeah, and I think with that, we'll talk about the weaknesses now before we go on to something else I wanted to ask. So. I know we've kind of mentioned the weaknesses of this army. Like you say, it doesn't really have any shooting. Apart from someone mentions the Terrorgeist Scream and the Zombie Dragon. I mean, it doesn't have any shooting. That's, I think, safe to say that's more than 10 inches, probably.
Yeah, exactly. I think there is, so Legion of Night, for example, has some play against shooting, and I've been kind of running a fairly off-meta list that's looking like really delving into that side of things. But yeah, generally speaking, if you go up against a heavy shooting army, you're going to have quite a tough time. Like, you're going to definitely need some dice on your side to win that one. Because yeah, combat, it's a heavy combat army. Depending on how you feel about aura management, it can be quite a fiddly army to play. There's a lot of Holy Within 12s and even Holy Within 9s, which I'm not a fan of personally. But a lot of Holy Within 12s, so you've got to be quite aware of that. I'd argue that that's potentially a weakness.
Yeah, I think we'll see a lot of that stuff going forward as well in Age of Sigmar.
Yeah, like Holding Within 12 I'm okay with. Prefer something like Holding Within 18 or something in the middle of that. But when you've got Holding Within 9, it's just like, come on, guys. Is this necessary?
And it's on like a 32mm base or something, and it's just like, there's just no room for any of this. But no, I think that's fair enough. What would you say is a good matchup for them?
Anything that's combat heavy. We've got, the cheap throwaway screens where like we can absorb those initial hits, and then you've got some really solid output coming from stuff behind. We've got that, sort of reanimation, the units coming back to life. So even if, that unit of 20 or 30 Graveguard get killed, you've got 10 or 15 because they get halved coming back. As I kind of alluded to, like Graveguard punch like nothing else. You've got some really clever and good movement shenanigans. Like basically I think if you took all of the combat only armies, if you removed shooting and maybe magic, probably Soulblight would be one of the strongest armies in the game. It's just, when they come into that magic and shooting meta, which we are unfortunately in. That's kind of rich coming from a Daughters of Cain player. But yeah, which we're unfortunately in.
Just imagine you saying that to someone when you teleport your blood sisters. They're the shooting ones, aren't they?
Bloodstalkers.
Bloodstalkers, sorry. You teleport them, and your opponent goes, "Oh, you're going to shoot my zombie dragon?" And you go, "Unfortunately, yes."
Unfortunately, your zombie dragon is now dead, having done that.
Yeah. They just pick it up and remove it and just go, it's painted brilliantly though. I didn't really get much of a chance to look at it, but just leave on the side. No, I don't even. I was going to say that it's probably, I know like from Legion of Nagash, one of the big things I always took was bat swarms, because they made the enemy, if they're within 18 inches of the bat swarm, while they're about to shoot something, they're -1 to hit from shooting. From what I've seen in the book, you don't have a unit that does that. There's not. So they've lost a way to try and make the enemy -6 to hit from shooting, which is obviously going to affect you quite a bit when you're going against those shooting armies. But to be honest, against some shooting armies, because some of their shooting can be so good, I don't know if the -1 to hit would have made a massive difference anyway.
Yeah,
like you're fishing for mortals and stuff. So
yeah, exactly. Against a lot of the big bads, it actually doesn't matter. Maybe Caradron Overlords it does, but generally speaking, -1 to hit from the top armies doesn't actually really bother them. I actually just wanted to one of the strengths which I wanted to mention, which I completely forgot, is this book is very much been written with 3.0 AOS 3.0 in mind.
Great point.
So like. This army is super command point heavy. And at the moment in 2.0, you're kind of like, how do I fit all these buffs in? Well, we've been shown by Warhammer Community that we're going to have a lot more access to command points. So like the strength of this book greatly increases with that. Also, Games Workshop, the rules writers have started making named characters generals within SubAllegiances, and that's been
great.
shown to give you a buff in terms of getting an extra CP each turn for having those generals. So again, we've got more access to CP. Also, potentially some of the monsters seem pointed that we've seen so far with things like Nagash going up by 100 points, Alariel going up by quite a lot in Broken Realms, that it seems that monster heroes are getting more expensive. And again, we kind of thought things like the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon was maybe a touch expensive for what he was doing, but when looking at it through the lens of 3.0 and him getting the monster and hero actions that they've shown, suddenly those points actually look pretty reasonable.
Yeah, like no dragon, like more attack now hitting on fours. It's all about those threes depending on what you find.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good point as well. And I can tell you, like, I had a game the other day with Soulblight Gravelords, and I was lucky enough to win the roll off to decide which side of the table I wanted to be on. So I picked the side with the commanding terrain, which allows me to get extra command points, exactly. And I paid for a command point as well. So I started like my first turn with 3, and I was generating like 2 every turn. And even I was sometimes running out of command points. Like, bear in mind how many I was generating. So you can definitely like confirm that very command point hungry army. But I did a video talking about the new CP command point generation in 3rd edition from what they're showing us in the community article. So you can check that out or check out the community article itself. But you literally can just generate bucket loads. Like what a Gloomspite Git's going to do with all the command points? Like, can they sell them? I think that needs to be a question.
Absolutely. I mean, first they just need a new book, bless them.
Yeah, but well, they just need the keywords to work. But
they just need SubAllegiances. I mean, I know they've kind of got them now, but still, yeah.
Yeah, it's like just boys. So it's like I can't wait for some more love coming from Destruction. I wonder what it's going to get an updated book. The Cruel Boys. They're cool. They're going to take all our attention away, aren't they? Yes, they are.
I mean, I'm excited for my big war finally having some shooting.
Yes, yeah, because obviously it's going to be the Orc Warclans, isn't it? So
yeah,
that'll be cool. Anyway, don't play that army. Play Soulblight Gravelords. But no. Anyways, but to be honest, like me and like I said at the start, me and Alex have done a video on the Iron Jaws, or we've done. Or I did one on the Bone Splitters as well. So like, there's lots of content there you can watch as well if you'd like to. But no, I think that's pretty good. I loved it how we talked about the strength, and then we talked quickly about the weakness, and then we went to talk about more strengths, which I think really just shows a sign for this book.
Yeah, I mean, I just go one more weakness. So like, for people that aren't aware, generally there's kind of a train of thought that there are like, 2 main guys that write the battle tomes. There's Bin Guy and there's Sin Guy. And basically, Bin Guy writes kind of badly written stuff, and Sin Guy writes the overpowered. Sin Guy loves like in addition, you get +1 save, in addition you get +1 to wound, stuff like that. This is definitely still a Bin Guy book. Like, there are artifacts and command traits which you just read and you're like, that's not even worth the paper it's written on. Like, there's a spell in the Vampire Lord where you cast it and on 3 up you do 1 mortal wound. It's like, I might as well do Arcane Bolt. Like, like there is bad stuff, but it's probably his best book, if that makes sense. So
he's probably proud of
it. There are still aspects where you're just like, this is bad, like within the book, and you're just like, I will never use this. But there is enough strong stuff around it to make the book as a whole really interesting.
Do you think because it's a great point, and also like for people who aren't aware of that stuff, it's fantastic. When he's done quite well overall in this book, do you think that's because he written an ability that was good, and then he went, oh no, that's too, I've got to counter it by making another artifact that's terrible? Like, it's sort of a counter.
Maybe he's finally learning, and maybe he'll become that like sweet middle spot of like, that fat middle, like, hopefully.
Well, maybe the Sin Guy is him from the future. And then there's like some sort of or maybe they're just the same person with split personality disorder. Like, who I really feel like there should be more from this. Or I just feel like Games Workshop should feed the fan fiction of this and just make up 2 people's names. But I do agree. But there are like we said, like some good things in here compared to some Sin books where it's like, I'm really struggling to find any synergy. Like,
Yeah.
he knows a Snesh. But the next thing I want to talk about is kind of a summary of the sub-allegiances. So no, as you can tell in this video, we're not reading through all the rules, page by page. We've done that before, and we'll do it in other videos and stuff. But in this one, it's more of a sort of a summary thing. So there are multiple sub-allegiances, dynasties, whatever you want to call them. I don't think they're called bloodlines, but I think bloodlines definitely are called away. Well, they might be called bloodlines. Can't remember. But anyway, what one would you like to talk about first?
Well, we might as well start with. No, we'll start with probably the strongest one, eh? Probably start with Vicross.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Vicross, however you want to say it.
Yeah. Words we mispronounce on the
Vicross,
channel. If it bothers you, I can't give a fuck and watch someone else. That's literally my response to that to those questions now.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So, what do you like about? Or firstly, which one is this? So people who are brand new to this army, they recognise some of the models. Which one is the Virkos dynasty?
So in theory, Virkos is your Wolfy boys. It's the new heroes like Belladama and Radikar. But ultimately, you're going to be looking at much more death rattle heavy than vampire. But like kind of a trend I think you'll find when collecting for this book is that when you look between these sub-allegiances, probably about 60 to 70% of your army is going to stay the same, and then that final 40 to 30% is going to change depending on what dynasty you're running in.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's what I was trying to say earlier. When it was like you're going to have like
Yeah.
your hordes, and then which I think is great because then you're seasoned to taste, and then it means that you're not having to buy kind of like a whole new model range within your army for each dynasty you want to try out.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, to start off with, the battle traits are excellent. So reroll casting rolls for friendly vampire wizards, or Virkos vampire wizards. Reroll cast is always good. Unfortunately, you don't get it on your Necromancer, who's one of the big wins in the book because he's not a vampire. But Belladama, who's already +1 to cast, she's now +1 rerolling. You could get to +2 rerolling without any problem. Anytime you've got rerolling casts, it's just it's so much better than +1 to cast for sure.
Oh, massively. Just to say for people as well, like if you are brand new and you're wondering, Virkos, is that just the special name characters, those vampires? When you take, let's say, a Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon in a Virkos dynasty, it gains the Virkos keyword. So, it's gonna affect all your vampire wizards in this army.
Yeah, another common myth. So, for example, Manfred is Legion of Night keyword locked. However, you could still run him in Virkos. It's not that you can't, it's just that he wouldn't gain the Virkos abilities because he doesn't gain that keyword, but you could still run him. And you probably should.
I was just saying that probably Neferata might be. I haven't
Yeah,
checked,
exactly.
but it might be
Neferata's
Jimmy,
Legion of Blood, Bordrai is Castellet. There's a few of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. Then you've got the other thing, haven't you? The strength of the pack is the wolf.
Yeah, so reroll wound rolls of 1 for Death Rattle and Dead Walkers. That's nice. It is wholly within 9, which is kind of what I was talking about, so it's a bit of a pain. But when we're talking about a lot of this, I'll talk about through the lens of Graveguard. So Graveguard with great swords hit on 3s, wounds on 4s. You're now down to 3s and 3s on the Graveguard.
Add one
So
to wound, yeah.
that's always good. On Dire Wolves, if we talk about wolves, they're 3s and 3s on the charge, so you're down to 3s and 2s. Because, in case you didn't know, Dire Wolves have the Dead Walker keyword as well as zombies. Worth noting throughout the book.
Yeah, I think Death Walkers and or Dead Walkers and Death Rattle are 2 keywords that are repeated in most of the Dynasty sub-allegiances that get benefits.
Yeah.
Is there any command tree that stands out? Because we won't read through them all, but just one that stands out.
For sure.
Here.
So I'm gonna probably talk about I mean they're mostly pretty good, but I'll talk about 3. So the first one is right now, as of AOS 2.0, the best command trait in the book, and that is Pack Alpha, which is once per game, the general can use a command ability without a command point being spent. So that's basically 10 free command points across a 5 battle round game because it's both in your turn and in your opponent's turn. And basically, what you do at the moment is you take the Coven Throne as your general, and the Coven Throne has a command ability which is +1 to hit, wound, and save on a unit wholly within 12, 18, I can't remember. But yeah, a completely bonkers command ability, which you're getting for free 5 times. Completely crazy. Now if we're talking about Graveguard, those Graveguard are going to be 2s and 2s on a 4-up save. Blood Knights are going to go up to a 2-up save, and again 2s and 2s.
I was just going to say the Coven Throne. I haven't got. I've got like 9,000 points of this army. I haven't got a Coven Throne. Does that just benefit like Soulblight stuff, or is it just like anything in there?
I'm pretty sure it's just Soulblight, yeah, but it's not summonable or anything. It's literally any Soulblight unit, so you can put it on whatever you fancy.
Lovely.
So yeah, as a 2.0, like if you're running Viacos, like it's difficult to look past that. But as we talked about 3.0 with more command points, this drops down. Maybe it gets 60% worse because you've got so many more command points. But I think even in 3.0, it's completely viable to run. Looking at it through the eyes of 3.0, where monsters and big heroes are getting better, Hunter's Snare is very, very good. That is, if this general contests an objective, the number of models this general counts as is equal to their wounds characteristic. So, for example, you've got a Vampire Lord or Zombie Dragon general. That model counts as 14? 14? I think so.
Yeah,
wounds.
14, yeah.
14 models on an objective, which is crazy. You've now got, you could still run a Coven Throne, so that dragon's going to be on a 2-up save. You can get it moving 20 inches, fly it across the map, bang it onto an objective, and now your opponent's having to put 15 models onto an objective to take it back or kill it, neither of which are going to be using.
Yeah.
That's really, really good.
And I can imagine that like sounding good and it saying like once per game or something, but the fact that
it just does it, and it's also wounds characteristic. So even if your dragon's on 1 wound, it's still got a characteristic of 14 wounds, so it will always count as 14. The other one worth mentioning is I think Kin of the Wolf, which is just once per battle. You can add a unit of 5 direwolves if your general's still alive. That's 70 points a free unit. Like it's not, if you're running something like often you'll find with Soulblight you're running very hero heavy lists. It's very like often I'm like writing lists and I've got 1,000 points of heroes. So just having that little extra 5 bodies can be really useful.
Yeah, like you can obviously hold a back objective. You can screen. It's 5 direwolves is nothing just to go. Oh, what's the point? It generally can be really good. I used to take loads of units of 5.
Yeah, and it's worth noting it's at the end of your movement phase, so you could, for example, and it's wholly within 9 of your generals. So if you're close to an objective, you could place them onto the objective at the end of your movement phase. So there's definitely like clever stuff you can do with it. Your opponent might just put 1 unit on an objective. Oh, I hold that. He's only got like their general that can get close to it, and then you bung 5 direwolves on and take it. So it's definitely got play and it's definitely clever. But I think if I was, it depends on how you're running the army, but I think Hunter's Snare or Pack Alpha for me are the 2 I'd go for.
Absolutely, I agree with that. I think, I look at, I say we would read through all of them, we're going to practically do that. But I think the driven by Death Stench, where it's like you can re-roll charge rolls with friendly Viacos Dynasty units wholly within 9 inches of this general. I think that sounds great because you're not spending multiple command points. Maybe that won't be too much of a problem, but to get that reroll charge. But it's the wholly within 9, isn't it? Which is the problem with all of this.
Exactly. That's for sure. That's where I stand with it. It's like if it was wholly within 12, wholly within 18, I'd heavily consider it. But as is, I don't know, maybe, but probably not.
But it sounds like one of those things, isn't it? Where you go, I can benefit like 3 units with this, and it's like you probably benefit 1 or 2, and that's it. So those are the command traits. Is there any artifacts that you think particularly are quite
so the artifacts are definitely where Viacos fall a bit short. But having said that, there's still some good ones. Like it's not enough to upset it too much. If I'm looking at it through the lens of 2.0, I'm probably taking Sang which is plus D3 attacks on the charge on a weapon. Again, I'm looking at putting that to a Hunter's Snared Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon. So now you've got this big scary dragon who's going to have potentially +3 attacks on its lance, hitting on twos, wounding on twos, 2-up save because of the Coven Throne, counting as 14 models on objective. Just an absolute nightmare to deal with for your opponent. Um, Potentially with 3.0, Standard of the Orphan Watch is good, which is basically once per battle at the start of the hero phase. For that turn, each time your opponent spends a CP on a 5-up, you receive 1 extra CP. Where I really like this is if your opponent's going first on a turn. Again, this is within 3.0, and they're having to really heavily think about whenever they spend their CP. And when they do, you're potentially getting more CP. So as then on your turn, you're able to say spam the Coven Throne's command ability or use Manfred's and just go all out, having maybe if you roll well, 5 or 6 command points to use on your turn. Um, and there's, it's worth talking about Terminus Cloak, which is just a once per game -1 to cast against enemy units. It's nice, it's worth taking. But yeah, none of the artifacts, when you compare it to what those command traits are doing, yeah, none of the artifacts particularly stand out.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think of the Elfin Khan?
Phylactery.
Yep, that's the one.
So on first read, I really liked it. I was really hot on it. And then when I started using the army, you get deathless minions from your grave sites as well.
Okay, yeah.
So I very rarely found that I've needed that. So for anyone listening, basically you get an 18-inch aura of deathless minions rather than 12-inch off your general. Yeah, I found it was very rare that I actually wasn't in range for deathless minions. It's definitely a possibility, but I think there's probably some better ones that you can go for.
No, that makes sense. No, it's definitely, I think, picked out the best ones. And then, so the next dynasty we'll talk about, I'll pick this one, is going to be the Castellet dynasty. Castellet?
Yeah.
Because this is one that I played most of, and this is, I have to say, I find this really fun, this one. Just because I love the mechanics within it. So you've got two main things for your battle traits. So you've got the shifting keep. Basically, you can have some Castellet Dynasty Blood Knight units. Instead of setting them up on the table and set them off the table, they can come on 9 inches away from the enemy, within probably 6 inches of the board edge, wholly within 6 inches of the board edge, in a movement phase. Now, I don't really like that ability because I find you're just going to teleport on and the enemy's probably just going to charge and kill you, but it gives you the flexibility to try and deep strike behind your enemy. The reason why I like this is for the battle trait, which is Might of the Crimson Keep. So I'll read out word for word what it does, and I'll hear your thoughts on it, Alex. So each time a friendly Castellet Dynasty Vampire unit destroys an enemy unit, that friendly unit gains the relevant ability below for the rest of the battle. A unit cannot gain the same ability more than once per battle. So the first one is, if the enemy unit was a hero or monster, you become blooded in strength. So you add 1 to the damage characteristic of melee weapons used by that unit, excluding the mounts. And then the next one is, if the enemy unit had a wing characteristic of 3 or more and was not a hero or monster, you get stolen vitality, which is add 1 to the wound characteristics of that unit. And then the last one is, if the enemy unit had a wing characteristic of 2 or less, you get absorbed speed. So add 2 to the run and charge rolls for that unit. So obviously I'm just going to say there are nice benefits here that are going to heavily affect, like a heavy Blood Knight army if they manage to tick these boxes. But what I really like about this is, if we step away from the tactical, competitive side and everything else, I just think it's just really fluffy and just really lore inspired. And I love the idea of your guys becoming stronger the more you go into the game. Like the table for the Eye of the Gods in Slaves of Darkness is kind of what it reminds me of.
It's really interesting for sure. It's cool.
Yeah, it's I think obviously, like an ideal thing is going against like an MSU army or something, because sometimes it will be quite hard to. Like for example, absorb speed. You may find by the time you've achieved that, your guys aren't needing to get that good movement because it might be at a late point in the game or something like that. But it is a nice thing, and something to just mention that it's not just for Blood Knights. It is for all your vampires in your army. So Vampire Lords, Zombie Dragons, Neferata, or no, maybe because Castellet. So there we go.
Yeah. But Vargeist, Vengorian Lords.
Yep.
No, there's a lot that benefit from it. I would just say with the Shifting Keep, with the deep striking ability,
Yep.
firstly, it's an answer against the shooting meta, in that you can, against KO who want to table you turn one, you can just chuck all your stuff off board and protect against that.
Yes. Good point.
Uh, Also, there's a kind of a build which is running around online quite a lot at the moment, which is Castellet with cogs. And when they're needing a 7-inch charge with cogs, suddenly actually Deep Strike becomes pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think like it definitely has its uses. Like in the like for anyone new, never rely upon a 9-inch charge. It won't happen. If that's your game plan, you're doing it wrong. Like it doesn't work. But like even for example, like I believe in Castellet running like if you're running pure Blood Knights, you're going to come unstuck. But like all you do is you have a unit of 10 skeletons. They pop up from a grave site, and then you pop up your Blood Knights behind them. So as your opponent can't get to them, but you've suddenly advanced, a good distance up the board and protected them against the Alpha Strike. So, it's not something you're going to use every game, but it's definitely situationally really useful.
Exactly, and it's just another element to play this army, isn't it?
Yeah, but as you said, Might of the Crimson Keep is really where Castellet shines, and to be fair, their command traits and artifacts are awesome. But yeah, I think you made a good point. Like most often, you're going to be getting the +2 to run in charge rolls. Like +2 to run, you won't need it because you'll be in combat. +2 to charge is always good, just for like slingshotting around units.
Especially if you've only got, because these guys got quite big bases and 1-inch range weapons.
Yeah, exactly. Like really, what you're aiming for is that killing a enemy hero or monster with the +1 damage, but it's pretty tough. Maybe in 3.0 with a bigger emphasis on heroes and monsters, we might see more on the table, and so more opportunity for it.
That's a good point. If there's ever a skink, Starcy or Priest who's happened to get lost in the middle of the battlefield, run that bastard down. That'd be great. Whichever is the one that's a hero. But I like when I used Castellet, I went against ogres, and I obviously got the Stone of Vitality, and then suddenly just like, oh, Blood Knights, 4 wings apiece. That's pretty tanky. Like so, it is, as well as being cool. It's got some use to it. I do wish that these effects continued until your next game, though. So that when you set up things in the Shifting Keep, I'm already +2 the charge. That'd be great. Bringing cogs,
brutal, yeah.
charging on a 5. But that's what narrative and open play is for, right? Exactly. But so going on to the command traits, what you already hinted at. So the Lords of the Crimson Keep. So I like. We're just trying to remember which one. I think it's Rousing Commander. Yes, because that's the one that allows you to benefit from the blooded strength and the stolen vitality. Like basically, your Rousing Commander, there's a rousing speech. All your Castellet Dynasty vampires, units that are wholly within 12 inches of him, benefit from the stolen vitality and the might from the Might of the Crimson Keep. Bash traits above, and the blooded strength one, of course. And you do it at the start of the combat phase. So you have to get your charges right and everything else to make sure that you're wholly going to be within 12 inches of your general, your commander. But when you get that off on a good charge, it can be brutal on Blood Knights.
Like you have to time it well. Like it's all in the timing. Like if you just do it into a screen, you've wasted it. But like if you, I don't know, say you're charging into a unit of 30 wardens in Lumineth wardens in Sire who are like a 2-up save because they've double popped their Aether Quartz. And if you pop this off, say you're damage 3 on the charge, you've got some other buffs up, so you're like +1 to hit and wound, you'll just blow them up just by weight of dice. And then you'll have crippled your opponent. So yeah, it's all in the timing, but it's a really strong ability. Just having those knights at damage 3 because they get +1 damage on the charge anyway. So yeah, just damage 3 going in, blowing up. It can potentially win you games, definitely.
And also, what I like about this, and something that I realised when I actually started playing it, I was like, well, I've done it now. I've done my once per game thing, so it was good while it lasted. And then my opponent pointed out, it's like, yeah, but you wiped out these 2 units, and now it means that you've basically gained these 2 abilities because you killed a hero and you killed 2 of 3. And it's like, oh fuck, that's what I love this because you used your once per game thing to now have it forever. So it's a really you have to be clever with your movement and stuff, obviously to line up for your charging, but shouldn't be too hard to do, and I think this is a very easy one to pick as like a great command trait from this list. Is there any others that you've sort of like seen and you've gone, ooh?
Yeah, so if we're going back to the cogs build where you're running cogs, so you've got +2 charge and you're deep striking, you've got swift and deadly, which is reroll charges for casteller units wholly within 12. So again, a 7-inch free rerollable charge. I don't know what the odds are, but about 80% of the time you're making that charge.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not good at maths, but I know like the average on 2 dice is meant to be a 7, isn't it? So like
exactly.
You
so
get
once
2
you're doing that twice, yeah, exactly. It's pretty high. So that's nice. I also quite like Power in the Blood, which is basically your general gains the Crimson Keep abilities for any model killed within 6 inches of it. So basically, yeah, you have your general, tagged onto a corner of, say, that unit, and like your big unit of Blood Knights has killed it. Your general also gains that ability, which I quite like. But yeah, ultimately, I think most of the time you're running Rousing Commander, and in a few situations you might run the Swift and Deadly for reroll charges.
Yeah, I think that's 2 good points as well. I think, like, Swift and Deadly, like we're going, like, the cogs build and everything else. Or what would you do? How much would you give to try and make the Blood Knights have a Hornblower in their unit? They gave them +1 to charge.
Yeah,
it'd be great, wouldn't it?
It would, wouldn't it?
I can see why they don't have it. So that's cool. So going on to the next one, which is the artifacts for the Castellet, which is the relics of Red Conquest. So, is there any here that stand out to you?
Yeah, so I think for me there's probably 2 which I'm taking. The first one, and I want to talk about a specific build that I would be taking this on most of the time, is Fragment of the Keep, which is subtract 1 from wound rolls for attacks made with melee weapons by enemy units within 6 inches of the bearer. So your general doesn't even have to be in combat with that unit, and they can be -1 to wound. And what I think is on a Vengorian Lord. People are, not loving Vengorian Lords, although I think people are coming around.
What do you mean? Do you mean model wise? Did you mean the rule?
I
like the model. I'll just say that I like the model.
No. So I wasn't that hot on the model, and I saw the model in person, and it's so much better.
Yeah.
But anyway, just in terms of its rules, people aren't hot. But what it does, which works amazing with Blood Knights, is it reduces the rend of enemy units within 3 inches of it. So basically, if your Vengorian Lord and a unit of Blood Knights charge a unit, that unit has its rend reduced by 1. So then your Blood Knights are essentially on a 2-up save if they're against anything with rend. Then you've got this artifact, which means that they're -1 to wound within 6 inches of the Vengorian Lord. So suddenly, -1 rend, -1 to wound. Pop, Rousing Commander on it, and you've got a really solid buff piece that is working kind of in tandem with your Blood Knights.
Yeah, that's. I was just gonna say, so that's the first half of it, isn't it? That's like the sensible half, and then the other half that's not as sensible as you take Neferata and a Mongol, and you made the enemy -2 to hit as well. And at that point, they're literally going to propose to you in marriage, I presume, how much they're going to love you. It's literally like it's a terrible unit. It's a unit of like 3 ogre gluttons, like you've done this to. But that would be great. But what's the next one you're going to say? Is it the Sword of the Red?
Gravesand Shard.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that is Holy Within 12. You get a 5-up for
Oh,
your no
yes,
pain
yep.
instead of 6-up for
Yep.
your no pain for your deathless minions. And basically, the play with that is that on your turn, you use your rousing commander, you go in, you smash face, and then your units are now sat there exposed, ready for your opponent to counter attack back on. At that stage, because it's at the start of the hero phase, you can do it with your opponents. You pop your Gravesand Shard. Now all your Blood Knights are going to be on a 2-up, 3-up, either a 2-up or a 3-up, I should say, with a 5-up after save. And it's worth noting, pretty sure they reroll once.
Yeah, their
on their
banner
after
gives
save.
them
They do. So it's a 5-up rerolled once after save.
Yeah.
So suddenly they go from being the super hard hitting force to this really quite defensive force with like good mortal wound protection. So I think that can be really good, kind of used in tandem with that. You hit really hard and then you're able to take the hit back.
I completely agree. This is what I used against those ogres, and he had so many Iron Guts. I was like, oh, I haven't seen Iron Guts for ages, and he was like, yeah, you're gonna wish that you didn't after this. But to be fair, like they charged, well, they're fighting near the Vengorian Lord that I had. They're -1 to their rend, so at that point, I don't think they had any rend. Being the Iron Guts, I think they've only got -1. They were attacking, so they're attacking I think what they're attacking like. It was the Blood Knights, yeah. They're attacking the Blood Knights, who've got a 3-up save because there's no rend for them to take. And they were re-rolling 1s to their save for, all-out defense. And then they had the 5-up after save from this ability, and then they're re-rolling 1s there.
Yeah,
and they go against
very defensive.
Yes.
And that's not to mention, if you've got like a Mortark, for example, in the list, you could have access to the Death Mage lore where there's some really good debuffs in there. Like you could really, become quite a defensive as well as offensive force with that build.
Yeah, which is really quite, and it shows that, like, if you want an army that is heavily Blood Knights, shall we say, not all Blood Knights, heavily Blood Knights, you go like, oh, is it going to work? The answer is yes. Like, you can have a bloody good time with it. So with that, let's move on to a other one. I'll tell you what, we'll do the Avangori dynasty.
Okay.
This is your favourite one, isn't it? So I'll let you explain this one.
I mean, it's an interesting one. It's not something I've run yet, but there is potential there. So this is basically like your monster match. So Terrorgeists and Zombie Dragons are battle line in here. So if you want to run pure monster, this is the army to do it in. And there's quite a funny.
I was just going to say, if you have a Flesh Eater Court army and you're thinking about maybe getting to Soulblight Gravelords and your Flesh Eater Court army is Gristlegore, like it's not the hardest transition over.
Yeah. There's quite a funny list going around, which is 6 models within Avangori, I think, 5 models, which is basically Nagash, a Vengorian Lord, and some Terrorgeists. It's excellent. But yeah, so like the first ability, which I really like, is subtract 1 from wound rolls for attacks made with melee weapons that target basically any Avangori monsters, as long as the attacking unit is not a monster. Which is, most of the time will be the case. So -1 to wound, against your, Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon, anything like that. Like, so where I'm coming out with Avangori is still running a mix of stuff. So still having my Death Rattle, Skeletons, and Dire Wolves, but just having some big monsters in there as well, and really buffing the monsters. So yeah, having the monsters at -1 to wound, solid. They're going to be more survivable. The other thing is basically once per game, each of your monsters for that combat phase can fight at its top bracket. So, like, say your Vampire Lord is on 2 wins, so really heavily bracketed. For that combat phase, it can fight at full whack, can be really quite scary. So yeah, it's good. Not groundbreaking, but it's all about just making the best of your monsters.
Yeah, I think, which is they don't particularly have the best command trait artifacts or curse mutations, which are mount traits. But like I said, it's not the best thing in this book, but I like it that it's giving you a reason to take zombie dragons and terrorgeists
Exactly.
Driving,
Like
because otherwise there'd be no real incentive.
yeah, it's pretty low on like the list of best dynasties. Like it's not the worst, I don't think. Um, but yeah, like it still leaves a lot to be desired, especially once you get into the artifacts and stuff.
Is there like so on that note? Is there a particular command trait and artifact that you think is better than the? I mean, you only get options of because actually guys who know is watching this. Like, I'm not putting the rules of this on the screen because we are just sort of like summarising it. But is there out of the three command traits to choose from, is there one that you think is better than the other two?
Maybe an eye for an eye, which is basically if your um, general takes any damage that combat phase, it oh no, sorry, it's if any wounds or mortal wounds are allocated, then it gets +1 damage for the rest of that phase, which basically means that you've got to let your say your vampire lord on zombie dragon get attacked first, which is a risk.
Yeah, I
Um,
think a lot of the time, Mage Sigma, and this may change, but kind of feels it's like when you're playing a competitive level, it's like chess on the terms where units don't really interact with each other too much. Just like when an enemy unit charges your unit and they can attack first, your unit is now removed.
Exactly. Like I think you can do it by like tagging a corner of the unit,
Yeah,
things like that. Like you can definitely make use of it, and you know, you sort of pile, and then you could do that, take some damage, and then pile in around the corner, for example, and pile into a big juicy target. So there's definitely play with it, but it requires knowing when to use it and when not to use it because yeah, what is worse than that is taking half your wounds, for example, and then fighting at half bracket, and you're like, right, cool. So that's it for command traits. Artifacts. Take one of the realm artifacts. Probably take Plate of Perfect Protection.
they
um, if I'm being honest.
reminds me of my later days. Um,
Yeah, it's bad. Um,
but the
uh,
but the lore of them is fascinating.
oh, the law's excellent. The law's writer had a great time. I'm not sure about the rule
Great
writer.
time.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, like, and the curse mutate. Okay, so yeah, so which one out of the three?
um, probably. So you've got once per battle reroll wounds of one. It's okay. If I was having to take one, I would take that. But like, not even like kidding aside, if I'm taking this, I'm taking plate of perfect effect. Perfect protection on my zombie dragon for ignore render one. It's just better than any of these.
Yeah,
Um, yeah.
and then
Uh,
yeah, and then the curse mutations.
mhm.
I just I kind of feel like because they're here, it means this book doesn't have mount traits.
Yeah, I think this is replacing map traits. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
which is a
I
bit
mean,
of a shame.
yeah, it is. I actually quite like Maddening Hunger, um, which is once per turn at the start of the combat phase, you can pick one enemy model with a wound characteristic of one, and that is within 3 inches of this model. If you do so, this model is slain, and you can heal one wound allocated to this model. So you get a little bit of healing, but like the main thing with this
Very
is that
good.
in AOS 3.0, we know that unit leaders are able to use command points.
Yeah,
So what you can do is you can charge your zombie dragon into this big 20 or 30 block, kill the unit leader, and then do loads of damage to that unit, and then they're unable to inspiring presence themselves, so make them battle shock immune because your opponent was banking on using that,
yeah,
and then they all run to battle shock. Also, charge it into a unit of pink horrors, kill the thing that lets the pink horrors come back. Um, like there's quite a few things throughout the game when picking a mod. Like it's not great because you can't break cohesion because your opponent will just pile back into cohesion if that makes sense. Which is where often other things like that work. But just for killing those unit leaders or killing a banner bearer, it's all right. I like it.
yeah. I think originally when I saw this, I sniffed at it. But since more information, like I say, 3.0s came out, and then you realise that actually unit champions are going to play or could play a pretty important part, then you realise actually it's now worth taking away like the champion. Or something. It's not just going to make the enemy lose one attack on one model. It's actually going to add a lot more. And I think what he's said about pink horrors as well is great. So,
anything to nerf pink horrors I'm here for.
I remember watching one spectator in one game, and it was in the Discord, and it was Luke versus Max, and Luke was playing Thunderbelly Ogres and had like one of the Mornfang Cavalry pistols. Just took a pop shot at a pink horror, managed to kill it, and then Max, being the Zeech player, managed to get 5 pink horrors back in return.
Yeah, for anybody watching, never do damage to pinks unless you can kill all the pinks. It's never worth it.
Awful
Destiny dice are a thing.
Yeah, awful stuff. So yeah, I don't think he rolled the one. Right.
No, definitely not. He's a Zinch player. So it doesn't roll.
I mean,
just like I'm going to use this dice now.
I mean, why play a dice rolling game? But that's a different question. So the next thing to talk about is like the traditional ones that we're all aware of, which is the Legion of Knights. So obviously it's had a bit of an update. So instead of I can't remember what it was before the bait rule, but it was, so this one is add 1 to the save rolls for attacks that target friendly Legion of Night, Death Rattle, and friendly Legion of Night Deadwalker units in the first battle round. Okay, so it used to be if it was in your territory. So your skeletons get and your zombies get a buff. When I say skeletons, obviously it's Death Rattle, so Graveguard, Black Knight, and Deadwalkers, like I said, can be direwolves as well. So this is good if you're like, so obviously if you're going to get alpha charged, so your screens are buffed. I can't imagine your skeleton units are going to be charging the enemy in turn 1 on their decision.
Yeah, so like Legion of Night is actually what I've been running most. Not because I think it's the best, but because I think it's got a lot of answers to the current meta, and also just because not that many other people are running it. Most people are like Castell and Viacross. But you've got to remember that while skeletons are slow, turn 1, if you get given first, you pop 30 skeletons out of the gravesite 9 inches from your opponent. They've then got 30 wounds of 4 up, 6 up to deal with, rather than 5 up, 6 up. So like it's situational, but like it's solid. Like again, it just helps against those armies that want to hit you hard turn 1.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a nice ability. And then the other thing is the Aegis Cunning, which is instead of setting up a Legion of Knights unit on the battlefield, you can place it to one side and say it is set up in ambush as a reserve unit. You can serve 1 reserve unit in ambush for each unit you have already set up on the battlefield. At the end of any of your movement phases, you can set up 1 or more of these units on the battlefield, wholly within 6 inches of the battlefield edge, and more than 9 inches away from all enemy units. At the start of the 4th battle round, reserve units that are still in ambush are destroyed. So this is better than it used to be, because it used to just be 3 units you could have in ambush, and now it's 1 for every unit you have on the table. So as long as you have more than 7 units, you'll be up compared to what it used to be. It's just nice. Again, it's a deep striking, isn't it? And I was going to say so it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts, if you say you've been running it quite a bit. Like when I used to run Legion of Night, I used to take Morgasts Harbingers, what aren't in this book, because they have that 3d6 charge, which is really helpful. So what is it that you're really liking about this? Is it to do with the Aegis Cunning? Are you using it as a big tactic or not really?
Yeah, basically cogs.
Cogs, yeah.
Yeah, so normally I hate cogs. The reason why, for anybody wondering why I hate cogs, is so what you normally use it for is +2 to movement characteristic and charge board wide. So that's great for you, but if you're paying 80 points for cogs, your opponent gets it for free. So basically it helps your opponent more than it helps you, because you're paying for it and they're not. So normally I'm like, no cogs, rubbish. But in this instant, because what I'm doing is leaning very heavily into that alpha strike and into crippling my opponent before they can shoot me off the board, having that Ageless Cunning basically means I can set some units up in well deployed grave sites straight in front of them, and I can set units off the table edge, which basically means my opponent has to screen everywhere. Whereas if they were just coming up out of grave sites, then they can just put their screens right in front of the grave sites and be like, cool, my important stuff is safe. Now they're having to screen the whole way around their army, knowing that I can hit them anywhere.
Yeah, and then because of
Yeah,
that, because they're having to screen everything, obviously most armies can't screen that much. And then if they can, you're making them make more decisions, which more chance they're going to make a mistake, and you take advantage of. Because we've mentioned cogs quite a bit, something like we don't know exactly how it's going to work, but I just thought an interesting point is, obviously your opponent gets the benefit, don't they? The +2 to move and charge. So if you can activate endless spells in each hero phase going forward, does that mean that in your turn you can make it +2 move and +2 charge?
I'm pretty sure it will be worded as predatory endless spells. I don't know that, but obviously there's a difference between endless spells and predatory endless spells.
Yeah.
And I suspect predatory endless spells will, while non-predatory won't.
Cool.
Just
wonder if you could just switch it to whatever's best for you.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, I imagine cogs will be in most lists, despite the army.
Oh, 100%. 100% it will be huge. But yeah, just the fact that you're paying for it and your opponent gets it for free. It's like if I ever go against an army where somebody's brought cogs, I'm just living my best life. I'm like, this is going to be a good day.
It's great, and it's just like you ask them, what's the other alternative that you get to reroll save rolls for the caster or something?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's just
which is like, it's fine. Like, I can see why people take it, but mostly you're seeing it for the movement. I think it was one game where I was running Items Deepkin and somebody brought cogs. I was like, cool, so now my eels are moving 16 inches.
Yep, and they're running
and
charging.
And they're running and charging with +2 re-rolling charges. Yeah.
Make it run a flat 6 because I can. And then beautiful. The sharks are what scares me in the army. But which a part of me's happy about, I have to say. But the next thing to talk about is the command traits. So the Rulers of the Night. Is there a particular one that you like?
Yeah, so personally, I've been running Swift form a lot, which is +2 to run and charge. So I put that on so I put that on a Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon, so now he needs a 5-inch charge to get in, which just makes it more reliable, and there's the potential if I roll hot for jumping over screens with my dragon, stuff like that. So I like that. I also like Above Suspicion, which basically just means that my general can use the deep strike ability, but come down anywhere on the board outside of 9 inches. So again, if you imagine, I've got cogs off, my opponent is now having to be prepared for my dragon coming down anywhere outside of 9 of him, which, it just makes you play a whole different game. It makes your opponent, rather than you having no deep strikes or teleport where your opponent just push up the field and not worry about their backfield, now they're having to be really cautious and leave units behind. It just makes them play a whole different game. I also think if you want to play old school Legions of Nagash, by which I mean hordes and hordes of skeletons, Unbending Will is very good in Legions and Legion of Night in general, because that's battle shock immunity within 12 inches. Because basically the new skeletons, they've got this thing where when they are activated to fight, they roll a dice for each mod in their unit that was killed earlier that phase, and on a 4-up it comes back to life. So basically they've got to fight second, but then when they do fight second, they get to bring half the models they've lost back to life. There is a cheeky thing with a Necromancer where basically they get to do that twice. However, you still have to roll Battle Shock immunity at the end, or Battle Shock at the end of the turn. So say you lost 29, you brought all of them back to life, you're still having to spend a command point or else you're going to lose them all. This stops that.
That's cool.
But yeah, so if you want to run hordes and hordes of skeletons, Legion of Night's probably the place to do it. They can deep strike all over the place. Turn 1, they've got +1 save, and you've got their Battle Shock immunity bubble.
Nice. That's solid. I like that. And cool. So with that, are there artifacts of power from the vaults of Castinia that you like? Is there any that do you go into the vault and go, I'm going to go this one every time? Is there an Aphil amulet lying around somewhere? The gem of I can't even pronounce this. Do you know what? It's not even worth trying to remember how.
Exsanguination. I've got it. I've got you.
I mean, we've already wasted too much time talking about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I just remember reading this one when they put this one in the Warhammer community article to make you want to play Legions of Night. I mean, I can't remember what it did. I know it was awful. Awful
On a
stuff.
6, it does D6 mortal wounds.
But every battle tome has this artifact. Like, that's
Not Sin Guy. This is a Bin Guy artifact right here.
that's- well, okay. So out
um,
of the 5 artifacts in this sub-allegiance,
yeah.
which one do you like?
So, um, there's 2 that I like basically.
Can I just say, just to
Um,
interrupt you again, what
yeah,
I've liked when I've been asking you what artifact you like, what command trait you like, I like it how you'll say there's 2 or there's 3, rather
yeah.
than it being a book or something where you go, oh, you go this one every time. Like, there's no question. At least it
So
gives you
that
some option.
exactly. So for me, this is part of why I play the army. For me, list building is one of the most fun things. Aside from playing, painting is an annoying extra. So yeah, if I have options, I'm on board. Yeah. Um,
Exactly.
so for me, I've got a couple. Vial of Pure Blood, which is once per game +1 to hit and wound. It's solid, you know. Gets that zombie. Admittedly, it's only on the lance, but gets that because mounts can't be affected by it. But it gets my zombie dragon's lance on 2s and 2s when it charges.
Yeah. And
From that alpha strike, it just adds to that overwhelming force that I'm putting into my opponent. Turn 1. Probably the best one is Morbeg's Claw, which basically gives you +2 to cast, but that wizard or it gives you +2 to cast army wide, but you can't move in that turn. And basically, you take a Necromancer and you take Balewind Vortex. So you activate it, you pop him on the Vortex, so now he's got a 24-inch range of all his spells.
he's not moving anyway.
And then he's got +2 to cast, maybe +3 if you've got a corpse card. It's great.
And it's
+2 or 3 to cast is awesome.
and if there's any other friendly, Legion of Night Wizards wholly within 12.
Exactly. So it's all Legion of Light Wizards wholly within 12 inches of the bearer, but that includes himself. So normally it will just be him, but because he's on the Balewind, he'll have 2 casts
And
at
the
extra
Balewind,
range.
because I was
Yeah.
just going to say, because the Balewind, obviously, you treat the Balewind as the model, don't you? In terms
Yeah.
of, so like the aura naturally gets probably like a
Exactly.
50
The aura
inch.
gets bigger all around. Yeah, it works really well. Something I just wanted to warn people off, because on the surface, Shard of Night is probably the best, which is ignore rend from all shooting attacks.
Mm-hmm.
However, rend 2 shooting is really rare in the game. You get it in KO, and you get it from Salamanders in Seraphon, and aside from that, you don't really see it. So if you want to ignore rend, take Plate of Perfect Protection. Because then you should get ignore rend of 1 across the board.
Because that melee as
Because on the
well.
surface, I was like, oh, that's really cool, ignore rend from shooting. There's loads of shooting, and I thought about it. It's like, oh, wait, it's all rend 1 or mortal wounds.
I mean, it'd be ironic dying to a Mortec crawler, wouldn't it, with this artifact?
It would be, wouldn't it?
Yeah, just like, what's your rend?
Yeah.
0. Just tell me it's -5. Okay. Okay, so is there any others, or those are the ones that you're thinking?
For me, they're the big ones, yeah.
No, that's cool. That sounds good. So that is Legion of Night. And then the last one, just double checking, yeah, it's the last one, thank God.
Yeah.
The last one is Legion of Blood, which is home to my favourite character, being Neferata, of course, the first of all the vampires. So, does it mean it's the best one? I'm not too sure. But the first thing we have, so from the battle traits, we've got Immortal Majesty. So, if an enemy unit fails a battleshock test within 3 inches of any friendly Legion of Blood vampire units, add D3 to the number of models that flee. So I've got 2 things to say about this. When I first read it, when we had the leaked battle tome, I was quite hopeful of this, because I was like, oh, going into 3rd edition, hopefully they're going to make Battleshock much more important and, impactful. From what we've seen so far, Battleshock looks like it's even easier to pass, because there's more command points and it's easier to do Inspiring Presence, which I think is a bit sad, because like this ability probably won't come up that much, like the odd time it will, but I don't think like.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'd say is that it makes your opponent worry and spend, because we're gonna, I think, as well as having more CP, we're gonna have more ways to spend CP. And so if you're like, right, if you roll that 6, not only are you, like, say it's on a Gold Grunters, which are quite expensive, like 5 wounds quite expensive. If you roll that 6, not only are you losing that 1 Gold Grunter, but potentially you're losing the whole unit.
Yeah, that's true.
So like it doesn't like often if I've got battle shock, I'm like right on like a 5 or 6, I lose an important unit, but otherwise I don't. Oh, I'll risk it. Whereas if I'm looking down the barrel of losing D3 more, if it's like an elite unit, maybe that forces me into spending the command point where I wouldn't otherwise.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. There, I think you're tempted to spend a lot of command points on on other things, and you might have to
Yeah.
either make the mistake of not having a command point left to deal with this, or you like you say you keep a command point in your back pocket where actually it might have been used to give you a reroll once to hit somewhere else that could have been a lot more useful. And then you've got the favoured retainers that I like this one a lot. I mean, it's not going to come up all the time, but basically ignore negative modifiers to hit and wound rolls for attacks made with melee weapons by friendly Legion of Blood Death Rattle units while they are wholly within 12 inches of a friendly Legion of Blood Vampire unit, or wholly within 18 inches of a friendly Legion of Blood Vampire hero. That is a general. So it's a unit, so it doesn't have to be a hero, unless obviously it's the general. But the reason I like this, I'm not saying it's the best thing, the reason I like it is because it's one of the things that we see in the book and one of the things you see in Age of Sigmar, that's ignore the negatives.
Mm.
So like not just like ignore both things. Like I know this isn't to do with save rolls, but like Ethereal where you get uh, the good and the bad end of that.
Yeah.
And then Neferata obviously has it's a spell, isn't it? That makes you
Unbendable, yeah.
yeah, but you can get +1 to save and all that sort
Yeah.
of thing. So it's cool. What are your thoughts on favoured retainers?
I want to love it.
Yeah.
And like sometimes you do love it, you go up against Lumineth who has inherent +1 to hit. Not to mention things like Avalanor who can make you another -1 to hit. You go up against Zinchar Kaon who potentially is at -2, -3 to hit. Like situationally, it's funny, like especially on like that big unit of Graveguard that I've talked about quite often. Like it really helps them, but in 60-70% of your games, it's going to do nothing. And if the rumours, this hasn't been confirmed yet, if the rumours of minuses to hit and wound are capped at 1, which is the rumour for 3.0, if that's true, then it becomes even less prominent because -1 to hit, -1 to wound, while annoying, isn't the end of the world. It's when you've got that -2, -3 that it just breaks you.
Yeah. It's gonna. If that is
But
true.
it's like if all your opponents play Lumineth, say play Legion of Blood, if all your mates play Lumineth, Zinch, go for it. Whether all -1 to hit.
Yeah, if you ever have that Gloomspite Gits player who goes like, oh, the only thing I've got going for my army is my netters.
They're like my favourite thing, my netter, my precious netter, and then you're like, he's worth nothing. Yeah. Like you want to break that poor Gits player's heart a little bit more.
I mean, I think it'd be worth just for that. But
yeah, I'm here for it.
Exactly. So the command tree. So the instruments of Neferata's will. Which one of these do you like? Is there one or is there a few?
I've not looked at Legion of Blood for a while. There's a few. We've got another reroll charges wholly within 12. It's always good. Saves your CP.
That's a good artifact. Very popular one in the Realm of Death, obviously.
Like there's a couple of good damage ones. You've got like exploding sixes, things like that. But again, the problem is with command traits is they only work on the hero, not the mount. So I'm looking at this through the lens of often taking the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, and when you're only buffing his lance attack, then the quality of it drops. Potentially, you've got -1 bravery within 3 inches of this general. That stacks quite nicely with the losing D3 extra models. Like potentially, if you've got, because one of the allegiance abilities for Soulblight is if they're within 3 inches of a death battle unit, they're -1 bravery. Potentially, you've got your opponent looking at -2 bravery and losing an extra D3 models.
And there's probably like a few other ways out there to give yourself an extra, making the enemy -1
Yeah,
bravery if you
and
want
then
to.
there's -1 to be hit for melee weapons for that general.
That's always
Cool.
respectable.
It's always good, just making your dragon a bit more survivable. I'd probably take that, to be fair, actually. That's probably what I'm looking at.
What about if you're
mostly because of the artifact.
Yeah, I like. Doesn't matter. Like, most books has this artifact, and it is generally useful. Have you considered though if your general is being attacked by a swarm of Death Rattle from Legion of Blood?
Mm.
I mean, or the
Yeah.
Graveguard could be happening, but yeah, I think that's always respectable. What's the Sanguine Blur? So friendly units that start a partner move, Hulu within 12 inches of this general can move an extra 3 when they partner. So that sounds quite good. Like, is that?
Yeah, like if for whatever reason, I mean, it's solid. Like it does mean that like if you just make the charge with one model, you can get all of it in, like all of the rest of that unit in. It could stack quite nicely with zombies. Get the good 6 inch
Mm.
piling, which means that they can pile in from 6 inches away rather than three. So basically, they can pile in from 6 inches away and pile in nine, so they can really get all their bodies in. Um, but maybe like, but I don't think it's really what Legion of Blood is for.
Yeah, I
But
don't.
yeah, maybe with Blood Knights getting those big bases and 1 inch reaching.
Yeah, I think so. I think Legion of Blood, like they don't have terrible command traits, but I don't think the best. They don't have the best selection
Yeah.
in the book.
Mhm.
But then with the artifact of power, so we've got treasures of the bloody court. Is there any of these? I'm trying to think. I remember Ring of Domination being good in
Yeah.
Legion of
So you
Blood.
got Soulbound Garment, which is a flat +1 to save. So now you have your dragon running around on a 2-up save.
Yeah,
Great.
having
You
a
know.
great time.
So you've got that. I quite like Orb of Enchantment, which is once per battle, start of the combat phase, pick an enemy unit within 3 inches and roll a dice. On a 3-up, that hero can't be picked right in that phase.
Hmm.
Basically, it's an anti-Archaon pick. But all Kragnos now. I mean, and Alariel, apparently Alariel's still good. But yeah, like if your opponent, I mean, the issue is your opponent can easily play around it and not finish their charge within 3 inches, is the problem. But if you can engineer it and Archaon charges in and you just go, you can't fight this turn, that's pretty good. But realistically, I'm taking +1 save.
Yeah. Could you like Orb of Enchantment is good, but could you imagine like you being all cocky? Oh, your Archaons are like 2.5 inches within range and it's a competitive game and all
Mhm.
that sort of thing. So I'm going to roll 3 up and you roll 2 and you just go, fuck. Shit. But obviously, but I like it how that's on a 3 and not like on a 5 and it's just like,
Yeah,
right,
although, I mean, having said that, if anybody wants proof that this is the bin guy that's written this book, just read the artifact for Shade Glass Decanter. I won't bore you with it now, but it is something to behold. It is a million words when none would do the same job.
I think
It,
that's like the second longest one he's written. Like,
it's just, it blows my mind. It's like, you got paid to write that.
I think he writes half of these rules at the start of the day and the other half 5 minutes
Mhm.
before he finishes.
Oh,
Um,
sorry. There's actually one other artifact I like. Which I
Moving
forgot about.
Domination?
No, Oubliette Arcanum, which is basically whenever an enemy wizard casts a spell within 18 inches of the bearer, if the spell is not unbound on a 5-up, that spell is unbound. So basically, on average, that's 1.5 pre-auto unbind, or 1.5 auto unbinds per game, which is really good. The issue is it's within 18 inches, so most wizards which have an auto unbind, it will be 30 inches because it's when they attempt to unbind. Um, but potentially with how much magic is out there, just being able to say no to Croak getting on a Balewind
Yeah.
on a 5-up with like +1 million to cast, or saying no to Kairos with his nasty 6 mortal wound spell, things like that. I mean, you got to roll a 5-up, but it happens.
It's only like if you if you did this every turn in a game, let's just say,
You would
you've
get
got
about 1.5 times, so
yeah,
1 to 2 times. Yeah, which is worth it, you know.
and I think
But,
yeah, I agree. I think that's very useful. And like you said, like your heroes are fairly combating in this army, so it's not like this is on a guy at the back who's not going to be within 18 inches of the enemy wizards. So
yeah.
and then the reason I keep mentioning the ring domination, it's not what I thought it used to be. I think I was getting mixed up with the orb of enchantment. But so the artifacts here excite me more than the command traits. Is what I'll say.
Yeah, like I think +1. I mean, often if I'm running Legion of Blood lists, I'm taking Neferata, which then means that she's got her unrendable spell. So turn 1, I've got my zombie dragon who's going to be potentially -1 to hit, 2 up save, unrendable because of Neferata's spell. I then cast the +6 movement with the zombie dragon, so now it's moving 20 inches. I zing it off across the battlefield, and I'm like, cool, you've got a 2 up, -1 to hit, unrendable dragon, deal with it.
I mean, how much of a good time is that dragon having? Like, just it's out of How to Train Your Dragon, isn't it? It's toothless. It's having a great time. Deaf to anyone who's standing against him.
Yeah, and now with 3.0, you can keep that +1. You can have it on a 1-up save for once per game with the heroic actions.
That's true, and he can have the he can heal. Obviously, if he takes some damage, heals D6 once per game, and then he can heal the D3 as well.
No, so the dragon hasn't got only Vordry's got Pacific.
Oh, did that change? Is it?
Yeah, the dragon's got hunger, so D3 if it kills any models, but only Vordry's got the once per game D6.
But my guy has a chalice modelled onto him. It's like, again, I was hoping that maybe Prince Vahordra would get his own model, but we've got lots of other nice new models.
Yeah. So yeah, like again, the zombie dragon is definitely a big winner coming into 3.0 if its points stay the same, which I think the book has been pointed to.
Yeah, I think so. So now that we've covered all the dynasties, I mean, I'll be honest, like I think we went through like the first half of this video fairly quickly, and then this bit is because obviously we went in depth and stuff. I was going to ask you like your thoughts on like spells and stuff, but there's quite a lot of good spells and there's quite a lot you could talk about it, so we'll leave that for
I can do it really quickly.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, sure, if you can do that quickly.
Yes. For vampires, you are taking one spell and one spell only, which is the +6 movement spell. Can't remember what it's called. Don't in front of me. But yeah, +6 movement spell.
It's called Amplifying Pinions or something, I think.
Yeah.
Amethystine Pinions.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's not worth the paper it's written on. And then the Death Mage Law is amazing. You've got about 3 or 4 spells. You've got -1 to hit.
Yep.
You've got -1 to attack and -1 wound on a hero. Oh no, it's just -1 attack. You've got -1 wound and -1 damage on a hero. You've got half movement for anything within 3 inches of a terrain piece. You've got basically can't move on a 5-up. Like, yeah, a ton of amazing debuffs. So the Death Mage Law is awesome, one of the best laws in the game. The Vampire Law is awful. Just basically treat it as all your vampire heroes have the option of +6 move.
Exactly. And just to make sure that I'm not getting mixed up, I think they still have you cast a spell on a 9 or more flat.
Except for the fact that a lot of the law with vampires states that you can't be affected by the spell more than once per turn, which is just bad rules writing, because you've got this whole allegiance ability where on a 9-up you get to do the effect of the spell twice, and then most of the spells tell you can't do it twice.
What about so I remember something I used to do in Legion of Nagash, where I used to do a spectral graph to you pick a terrain feature visible to you within 18 inches, and enemy units that are within 3 inches of it are half their normal movement.
So Death Mage spells you can do it with.
Okay, that's fine.
But the problem is with Death Mage spells is you are only Mortarks and Necromancers get it, so you're taking one Necromancer and one Mortark maybe. So like the chances of you rolling at 9-up pretty low. Yeah,
I see that. Because also it's unmodified as well, so it's not like you can get pluses or something.
Exactly, and it's not War Scroll spells or anything like that. It's just the law spells. So yeah, it's sad. It could have been a lot better than what it was. And when you consider how good some of the other magic is in the game, I don't really know why they didn't.
Well, it's Bengar, isn't it? Like you say.
Yeah.
Of course. Right. So with that, looking stuff into the battle tome, just like the last sort of like to sort of bring this towards a close, I've got a few questions for you. So thank you for all your advice stuff you've given so far. Greatly appreciative. So a bit of a fun question. This one is: what would you say your 3 favourite units from this book is?
I
know so many units, so many different tactics and everything.
Yeah, so firstly, I think the favourite is Manfred. I know that's a dubious call, seeing everybody hates Manfred because he was responsible for the end times, basically.
Yeah, he created a better game.
But I mean, he did create a better game, absolutely. But Manfred is amazing.
Yeah.
So in terms of what particularly makes him amazing, so he's pretty good in combat to start with, which is nuts. He's 16-inch move on a 3-up save now. I think he used
Yeah.
to be a 4-up, so that's really good for him.
And he's got
Um,
12 wounds now. He used to have 11. So, like,
yeah,
actually, the game I used Manfred in, he got to 11 wounds by a Stonehorn, and he was surviving on 1 wound. And that was a perfect example of me just saying, like, before I can do anything with the Mortarks, they take 11 wounds and they die. So,
yeah,
like, they're a lot more survivable than they used to be.
exactly, yeah. So the big thing which makes Manfred very good is his teleport ability. So basically, at the start of the combat phase, if he is within 3 inches of an enemy model, he can teleport anywhere on the board. Basically makes him, if you want it to be, unkillable against melee armies because, you know, he gets charged by something you don't want him fighting, he gets out of there. This has all kinds of weird and fun plays with it. But yeah, basically, what I will normally do with him is I'll charge him in on my turn, he'll hit the corner of a unit where he's pretty safe, he'll fight, and then when the counter punch comes, he teleports away. And often my opponent will actually be like, actually, you know what, I'm not even going to bother because then he'll teleport away anyway. And so then, you know, Manfred sat there in a good position doing his own thing.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think, like, I've also heard, like, said to someone, and someone said, like, well, what happens if the enemy screen the entire board, so you know you can't be 9 inches away? I was like, if the enemy's got that much ball control, you've probably lost the game anyway. Like, and the other thing is, like, when you teleport away, like, say, you can make him in a good position, so his command ability that helps your guys out in combat, you can reposition him to try and help out.
Yeah, and it's exactly the flip side, and it's exactly what I was talking about earlier with my Legion of Night stuff, which is having that teleport makes your opponent play differently. They no longer can push up. Like having that teleport, like my daughter's a Kane army as an example, has 7 teleports in it, which is just bonkers and shouldn't exist. But watching my opponent get like analysis paralysis from just like he can be wherever he wants just changes how your opponent plays the game. So even just having one, you know, having Manfred able to drop in behind my opponent completely changes how they play their game.
Like someone who's like gone into that door as a Kane army as an example. I'm sure, like, you know how long my movement phases are where I'm just like, I just don't know what to do, and then eventually I'm just like, fuck it, don't care about screens, you're gonna kill me. That's fine.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's one of his big wins. A nice little extra. He ignores the first wound or mortal wound in each phase, so makes him more survivable again. We like it.
Yeah.
He's got just a free ability where basically if his Geist 4, which is his blade, basically the name of his blade, if that deals any, no, if any that slays any models, he gives +1 attacks to Soulblight summonable units wholly within 12 inches of him. Where this works really well is with skeletons. So skeletons want to be fighting second because of their reanimation I talked about earlier. So basically you charge Manfred in, he fights, he gives +1 attack to those skeletons, they get attacked, they lose some, they come back to life, and then those skeletons get to fight with +1 attack. Also, you know, if your Graveguard are in a position where they're survivable, Graveguard on +1 attack are absolutely terrifying. I'll talk about them in a minute. So there's that. His command ability is a aura of +1 to hit and wound within 12 inches, wholly within 12 inches of him. Amazing. Yeah, cool.
Yeah,
like
right.
He's going to be spending most of his game on 2s and 2s. You know, those Graveguard are going to be 2s and 3s. Those Blood Knights, sorry, are going to be on 2s and 2s. Yeah, it's great. And then his spell, I quite like taking the Umbral Spell Portal with him.
Yeah.
Basically, from 36 inches, I pick a model, I do D3 mortals to them, and then for every other enemy unit within 6 inches of that unit, on a 3-up, they take D3 mortals.
Yeah,
and what you'll very
one.
often find these days is that the top armies want to castle up. So whether that's Lumineth, Seraphon, Kharadron Overlords, Daughters of Cain, to be fair, they all want to be quite close together. So just being able to do that chip damage from turn 1 is very strong. But yeah, it's mostly that teleport. Like the fact he hits quite hard and can just like teleport wherever he wants is super strong.
Yeah, it's generally like as like I say, someone who used to run the Mortarks and they just weren't good enough to do. When you like read Manfred's War, it's generally like when you read it, it just feels like a good War Scroll. Like it's not like you're taking him just because he does like I said, his teleport's really good, but he also adds a lot more to the army. It's not like sometimes when you read a War Scroll, and sometimes particularly with like new characters that come out, it's like, oh, so he's really good for being him. What does he add to the army? At least, Manfred, he's cool, he can teleport, he can be used as a great screen, everything else. Make your enemy overthink with deep striking, and then he can also, like, a great command ability as well.
Yeah, exactly. He's the epitome of like a utility piece. Like he doesn't do anything amazingly, but he just does everything well. Yeah.
Exactly, and worth taking in certain builds and stuff. Okay, yeah, well, that was a great answer for like your favourite unit. What, you got 2 more?
I've talked about them a few times, Graveguard.
Graveguard, yeah, because
Yeah,
they've had a massive upgrade since.
Exactly. So specifically, it's Graveguard with Great White Blade. So yeah, Graveguard with Great White Blade.
I'm just crying.
2 attacks each.
I'm sorry. I was just gonna say I've got 20 Graveyard, and they're all built from ages ago. They've all got shields.
Oh no! But the shields are still like they're still
yeah.
nice.
They still got better. But
yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. So 2 attacks each, 3s and 4s, -1 red, 2 damage. 2 damage being the key. Also, an unmodified wound roll of a 6 is 1 mortal wound in addition. So let's say you go all in. I don't think you'd ever need to, but you had a block of 30. So straight off the bat, you're looking at doing about 5 mortal wounds in addition there. We then talk about buffs, which I've talked about quite a bit. So +1 to hit and wound, easy. It's very easy to get them on 2s and 2s. So then we're talking about that block, 60 attacks, 2s and 2s, -1, 2 damage. You've then got, for example, the Necromancer, who can make the fight twice. You double their output. You've got, that I can think of, 3 sources of +1 attack in the book. So +1 attack across the board, you're making their output 50% greater. My point is there is so many ways to make 20 Graveguard kill everything in the game. Like, our fully buffed Archaon will die to a fully buffed unit of Graveguard. It's ridiculous what they could do.
Beautiful to hear those words.
The problem is their 4-inch movement. They are super slow. They are a counterpunch unit. They sit behind your skeletons die, your Graveguard go and punch whatever is there in the face.
They reminded me when I first read the new War Scroll, like by how you described them, they sound like much more combat effectiveness than them. But how I was comparing them to was like, I think under the right builds and synergy, you can make like Chaos Chosen very killing in combat. But their movement is just like it's like 4 or 5 inches. So like the enemy's either going to shoot them off, or if you don't go Nurgle or Slay Starkness, so you've just got to like move up slowly with a screen. But I think where Soulblight Gravelords does well is you could kind of, like you said, you can screen your Graveguard, but you can also you've got fast screens as well, so you can try and like lock the enemy in their territory a bit.
Direwolves. That's some of the best screens in the game, no doubt.
Yeah, and then you could I don't know if this works, and you've got the points for anything else, but like you could have it with the direwolves, like they're screened by the time the enemy's dealt with them. You've got like 1 or 2 units of Blood Knights that charge in. By the time your Blood Knights retreat out of combat again, your Graveguard are up there. They've still got a screen, so the enemy can't try and counter them. It's your turn, then you charge like your 3rd wave in as your grave. Like you could do like a wave system maybe.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And the nice thing as well is we're talking about the wave system. Say you took a 30-man unit of Graveguard, they die. You then roll your dice in the battleship phase. If you roll what you need to, you get 15 Graveguard back, which, as we've discussed, 10 Graveguard can still be really scary. So you've now got that 4th wave, for example, of Graveguard ready to hurt your opponent. Which is why where my Alpha Strike Legion of Night list comes in is really good, because I send those Graveguard in turn 1, they blow something up, they then die, and then I bring them back to life, and in that, turn 3, I've got that punch coming later.
Yeah, which is I think works just really nicely, and it just feels a bit like I don't know, like a what's the correct word? Is it a pianist, the person who plays a piano?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, just like a beautiful performance of that,
Yeah.
of like just how it all works and everything, which is really, and it's nice to see Graveguard be really good, and also like you say, units of 30. Just in case anyone's wondering, they are on like 25mm bases, aren't they? So like that's why you can have that many attack.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. If it was 32mm, different story.
But no, like ultimately, I think you'd only ever want run 20. Like 20 still kill whatever they touch with just a couple of buffs. Even unbuffed 20 do a scary amount of damage.
As far as I'm aware,
there's one guy I play really regularly who always runs Fleshy at courts, and like he runs like big 6 blocks of flayers, which like just a lot of wounds are like notoriously hard to do through. And he kind of underestimated them. He's like, oh, I'll put my flayers out, like they can take the hit and then they'll just bring them back to life. And yeah, I think I got about on the charge I got like 13 Graveguard in with only +1 to hit and wound, and they still wiped out the unit.
wow.
Yeah, like it's scary what 10, 20 can do.
Exactly.
But
Like
it's just their movement lets them down a little bit.
But
But
there's
that's what
ways
Grave
around
Sites
it.
are for.
Exactly. There's ways around it.
Exactly.
Certainly with that one. And then your third favorite unit.
Yeah, I was between Neferata and Belladama on this one, but I think I'll go Belladama just because she's a new pretty model.
Yeah, I haven't
So
heard
she's the Wolf
loads about
Grandma.
her, so that'll be interesting.
So yeah, Wolf Grandma. She's firstly worth knowing she's 200 points. That's quite important within what we're talking about.
Yep.
So 200 points, she gets +1 to casting, dispelling, and unbinding. Great. She's also a 2-cast wizard. So 200 points for a 2-cast wizard. We're going places. You're normally going to take her in Via cost. So now you're 200 points for a +1 to cast, re-rolling, 2-cast wizard. Then you're like, oh, but she's 9 wounds on a 4-up. If there's a unit of direwolves within 3 inches of her, she gets a 3-up bodyguard save. So chuck that unit of 10 direwolves, or back to when we were talking about it, you've got the command trait where you get 5 free direwolves, summon them next to her, then it's a free bodyguard for her to sit with her, and that's 10 more wounds that she's potentially got access to. So she becomes pretty hard to kill, which is often an issue with these casters. And then really it comes down to her magic. So she's got 2 very, very good spells. The first one is an aura of exploding 6s. So wholly within 12, cast on a 6. Soulblight Gravelords units get exploding 6s. So if we're talking about Graveguard, suddenly that 6s to hit are exploding, which means more attacks going into those wound rolls for potentially more mortal wounds. So really good.
Yeah.
The spell I really like, for anybody who's played against Kairos, they know that him putting his spell through the spell portal and just doing 6 wounds and then bringing a spawn in, that spawn can be an absolute nightmare to deal with. And she does a very similar thing. Basically, she does D3 mortal wounds at 18 inches, but I'd always take a spell portal with her for that 36-inch range. And basically, for each enemy model slain, you can set up one direwolf or one direwolf model for each unit and for each model slain. So potentially you can get 3 direwolves tagging your opponent's unit, and all you do there is you put that direwolf 2.9 inches from your opponent, and then it comes to your opponent's phase and they're still in combat. So either, if that's a shooting unit, they've got to shoot that unit off before they get to shoot at anything else, or they'd have to retreat and so they can't charge. Yeah, it's an absolute nightmare for your opponent to deal with.
I really like the sound of that, and also that's because she's turned those enemy models into direwolves, right?
Exactly, yeah. So that's the lore on it. Is she turns those models into direwolves, which is kind of cool. And it's just funny. You're just like, oh, you're precious, expensive unit. They're now my wolves. And yeah, it's a nightmare to deal with. And as I said, we're going back to that. It's like, oh, but will she get it off? Well, take a corpse part in your army. Now she's going to be +2 to casting,
Yeah,
re-rolling at a 36-inch range. Like that's really efficient for 200 points.
exactly. Like you said, something important to note when we talk about this: 200 points. That, that's really good.
Really, really good.
And what I think's cool as well, is a named character, and it's good because I mean, maybe I think most of them are bad, and it's not. It's just because I notice the bad ones more. But at least like 50% of all named characters that come out are pretty useless. So it's cool to see like a new name character
Yeah,
come out.
like all of the pretty much maybe -1, all of the named characters are useful in this book. It's awesome, and that's actually kind of a problem with the book. 'Cause I'm like, I want to take everything, I want to take Belladama and
Mm.
Radukar and Manfred and a zombie dragon and a coven throne, and that's like 1,500 points. I'm like, I can't do that.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. It's like
so
so.
yeah, that's real. My big trouble with list building is trying to fit all the heroes in.
Mm.
Um,
And then
which
realizing
is
that you
quite a
need.
nice problem to have.
It is.
Uh,
It is.
it's also worth it's also worth noting both with Belladama and Manfred, they count as the general in their own dynasties, which
Yes.
with 3.0 in mind basically means that you've got more reliability for getting that extra CP for your general being alive. So talking about CP, that's really useful.
Yeah, exactly. And I think and for a lot of those named characters, that's the case. And something I noticed there as well is when you said, the spell that gives off that aura ability, a lot of those, not every single one, because sometimes it's pick a unit wholly within 12 inches, but there's quite a few things in this book where all your Soulblight Gravelord units, if they're wholly within 12, are benefiting from it,
Yeah,
which is,
yeah. So that's kind of what I said at the start. It's like there's a lot of aura management and making sure
yeah,
stuff stays within there. But if you get good at that, then this book can be really strong.
exactly, which is cool. And so that's your three favourites. I'm just going to quickly ask you, what's your least favourite?
Oh, Black
Black
Knights.
Knights, yeah.
Oh, actually, no. Everyone's complaining about Black Knights. I'm gonna say the White King.
The White King. On
Uh,
steed or on foot?
on
He's
probably
like,
on.
if you look at his characteristics, he's quite good on a steed for his points, but everything else is terrible. Like,
Yeah, I mean, basically the problem with the White King is that his command ability until it gets FAQ'd is unplayable. Because basically at the moment, for anybody who doesn't know, it's reroll hits of 1 on a unit until the end of that phase, and it happens in the hero phase. So it's like, what? Like you get reroll hits of 1 in the hero phase, which doesn't matter.
so
Um,
so I was looking at some Games Workshop jobs and stuff the other day, and one of the jobs they had, it wasn't for Age of Sigmar, but it was for I think Lord of the Rings and Horus Heresy, and the job was for basically proofreading. So like when a new rule book comes out, someone goes through and reads it to make sure the rules are right. I think they need to recruit one for Age of Sigmar because I mean I feel like me, you, everyone else in this hobby has been doing that job for God knows so long until the FAQ team. That's probably what
oh,
they've
right.
relied on, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, until that gets, I mean, there'll be an FAQ at some point, hopefully soon. Hopefully, it
Yeah,
just
yeah.
doesn't get. You're not.
But
You're
no,
probably not really going to be taking it much anyway. But
but being realistic, it's the Black Knights. That maybe they're a meat wall of
they're too
wounds to
expensive.
work through, but they're too expensive. They're on a 5-up save.
It's,
Yeah,
so Black Knights used to be bad, and then Legions of Nagash made them better, but they still weren't that good. And then it
yeah,
was like this was their like they're getting better slowly. This was like the next buff, and then it just made them worse than any. Like they've got shields, but apparently they don't do anything. They are, yeah, not great. But something just to mention, the direwolves. I'm probably just gonna say direwolves are my favorite unit because I think they're amazing at what they do. And when you're saying like what's the name, Bellarana,
Belladama.
Belladama, and you're saying like, oh, she's got those direwolves, so they can pass off damage to them and stuff. And direwolves, like we've already mentioned, they're not a unit where you feel like, oh, I'm not really taking them in my army anyway. I imagine like if I'm building most of my lists, will probably include a unit of direwolves.
Yeah. So for me, if I'm looking at battle line, and I'm not running something like Castellet where Blood Knights are battle line, I'm taking 2 units of direwolves and 1 unit of 10 skeletons normally. Yeah, direwolves are awesome. It's 20 wounds for 135 points. Because they're on big bases, a unit of 10 covers like 25, 30 inches of the map. So you can just block off entire ends of the board
Yeah.
with the direwolves, and on the charge, 3s and 3s, 2 attacks each. They do work. They're all right.
Yeah, like they are. Don't ever look at them and think like, oh, they can do loads of stuff, but don't be too surprised. They, I don't know, do a couple wounds or something that can be.
They do chip damage. Like they're not gonna, do any damage to your opponent's threats. But if they're clearing screens, yeah, they'll do that, 100%. But that's not their job. Their job is screening screening for those big damage hitters like your heroes, your blood knights, your graveguard.
Yeah, I mean, like, I've just like one story about direwolves I've got is I charged years ago. There was two Dracov riders, from Stormcast,
Yeah.
and they had 2 up save rolling 1. Vampire on Zombie Dragon charges in, doesn't do anything. The one direwolf that tagged them in combat has 2 attacks and does 2 damage. So
Nice.
the enemy rolled 2 ones to save. I got all my attacks through. The enemy rolled 2 ones to save, rolled them again, and got double 1 again. And I was like,
Love it.
that's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. That dog was a good boy. It then got butchered by Lord Celestin, but sad times. But okay, so I think we've talked so much about this army now. So I don't know why I need to ask you this question, Alex, but I'm going to anyway to sort of close off this video, and that is going to be finally, just in case anyone's still wondering. I'm not gonna lie, if you've watched this video from the start and you've got to this point, clearly this is an army you're going to do. Fantastic, glad you made that decision. But can I ask you one more time, Alex? Why would you play this army, or why would someone play this army over another army? There's so many options out there. Why would you pick this one?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we're mostly playing armies for their aesthetics, let's be honest. You want to paint them, you want to build them. Like 100%. The aesthetic is vampires, skeletons, death. It's a very cool, awesome aesthetic with a ton of new models. If we're looking at it from a rules perspective, it's a solidly fat middle book with lots of interesting interactions, with lots of unexplored directions, which will make you a better player. Like it's not a plug and play army. Like it rewards good play. So if you wanted to, take your Age of Sigmar play from casual through to something a bit more competitive, this would be an amazing tool to teach you how to do that.
Yeah, but fantastic summary, and I'm just going to say everything he said on that one. But no, exactly. Like this is, and for me personally, this is an army. Like I know it hasn't always been called Soulblight Gravelords, but just the vampire count aesthetic. I think what you said there, basically awesome vampires leading, legions of skeletons, and that's just one way you can play this. You can play it other ways. When you put all that on a board as well, it just looks beautiful. It just feels right. And there's just so many different ways you can play this book, which I think is amazing. So with that, guys, I'm going to bring the video to an end. I'm going to say a massive thank you to Alex, because this video has probably gone on for about 2.5 hours, which is absolutely amazing. I think every video you've done, because there's so much to talk about, and bear in mind this is kind of a summary of this video. There's so much more you could talk about, but because we've talked a nice amount of in-depth about this army, I think you have to do that to do it justice, Alex. I don't think there's any other way.
Yeah, for sure.
So thank you so much for coming on. I do appreciate that. And maybe in the year of 2022, you'll get, oh, really, should I play Soulblight Gravelords? And then you'll watch this video again, all 2.5 hours of it. And then you'll go, yes, I'm going to listen to my past self and say, this is the army for me. All the Blood Knights, please. But yeah, so thank you very much for coming on. I hope everyone else who's watching this video, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something from it. If there's any more questions, like I said earlier, make sure you put that in the comments down below, and I'll be able to help you best I can on anything that maybe we didn't answer in this video. If there's anything you think that me or Alex missed in this video, bear in mind, like we said, this is like a why play summary. Let us know that in the comments, because it's not just us who's going to learn from it. If you've got some advice and some experience of the army, anyone who's looking and watching this video is looking at doing this army, so any advice you can put in the comments, they're going to appreciate as well. And if you did enjoy this video, make sure that you absolutely smash the shit out of the like button. If you could, please as well press the subscribe button. If you do that, I'll love you forever. And if you don't do it, Manfred will come and skin you alive in your dreams. And if you haven't already, please as well smash the bell button. So they are 3 buttons. all next to each other. By liking the video shows me that you enjoy this sort of content, so Soulblight Gravelords is going to encourage me to make more of it. And also by liking the video, it shows YouTube people are enjoying this video, and hopefully I recommend it to people. By subscribing to the channel, it's the way the channel grows and allows the content to get better. And by pressing the bell notification means that you'll never miss a future one of my videos. And I plan on doing a lot more videos on Soulblight Gravelords, so you won't want to miss that. And the other thing I want to say as well, if you think you know someone else who will enjoy this video, make sure you share it with them. If you would like to join the great community we've got going on in the Age of Nagash Discord, there is a link to that as well in the description of this video. So you can join the Discord community that's got like 270 something members. I think like even since like you joined, Alex, it's gone up more and more, which is fantastic. And lots of new people join as well. So there's been lots of people learning the game. Everything else, so join the community if you'd like to. Plenty of Soulblight Gravelord players there. And what I'd like to say as well is a massive thank you, as always, to my patrons and YouTube members, who, because of these people, I'm able to keep doing a YouTube channel. Like I always say, you know, the amount of resources and time and stuff you put into YouTube, if it was a business, you'd be in bankruptcy so much. But because of these people, it justifies, well, it allows me to justify the amount of time and effort I put into these videos. So thank you so much to these people. If you'd like to become one of these amazing people, make sure you click that join button next to the subscribe button. Allow you to become a member here on Age of Nagash. We can give anything from £1 a month, goes straight towards the channel, keeps it going. Or if you click the link in the description of this video, you'll find a link to my Patreon account where you can give anything from just $1 a month. Massive goes to, like I say, supports the channel, allows me to keep doing this. Didn't have any patrons, YouTube members, wouldn't be able to do the channel. So these people make it all worth it, and my biggest support amongst all of them is going to be my Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon, which is going to be Filq. So thank you so much for your continued support, Filq. I think me and the amount of times you mentioned Vampire Lords and Zombie Dragons, Alex, I mean, they're clearly one of the best units in the game, I think, or at least in the book. So thank you so much, Filq, for supporting at that level. Makes a huge deal. And then my Morgasts, who's going to be Bleed Red. So thank you so much for supporting me for quite a long time, mate, at that level. And then my Vampires, who are Mir, Stence, Raz321, David A, Dragoonity, and then Ronni H, Darren L, SpareBear, Christopher H, Northdrop, Nathan F, Andrew G, and Ben C. Thank you to all my Vampires. You do an amazing job, especially when we're talking about Soulblight Gravelords. It's very relevant. And then my Necromancers, who is Jacq.l, RadiationRiley, AW77, Dice Sagas, WolfNick, Michal W, Cranky Wombat, Madcap, Krista C, Krista F, James S, Thomas B, Steve T, James T, Patrick F, JJ, and R. Christopher. Thank you all so much for allowing me to keep doing this and help people get into the Age of Sigmar community and continue their journey through Age of Sigmar. If you'd like to support their way, like I said, click the join button or the link to my Patreon. If you can't do that, no worries at all. I'm just really glad you came and checked out this video today. If you did enjoy it, like I say, like, subscribe, smash the bell notification, massively helps, and it's all free. So with that, like I say, I'm going to thank you again very much for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Any more questions, leave in the comments down below. Massive thank you to you again, Alex. Appreciate your time. And with that, guys, remember until next time to stay safe, stay hygienic, make sure you wear a mask, and for God's sake, wash your hands, because I've been told if you've got clean hands, your dice roll better. It's fact, it's science, whatever you want to call it, it's physics, bitch. And anything else beyond that, though, remember until next time, especially in this video, that Nagash is all, and all is one in Nagash.